the hum of Tesla engines, and the constant hum of ideas inside Elon Musk's mind. These were the sounds that filled his days. But on one seemingly normal morning, a call would come that would shatter the monotony of his life and set him on an entirely new path. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon was sitting in his private office at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. It was early, the California sun just beginning to crest over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the cluttered desks and models of spacecrafts. His mind was already miles away, contemplating the next step for his Mars mission. After all, what was more important than getting humanity to another planet? Colonizing Mars. This was the grand mission that had consumed him for years. But then, his phone rang. A quick glance at the screen told him it was his assistant, Lisa, calling from the main office. He picked up, expecting the usual updates on meetings or schedules. Instead, her voice crackled with urgency. "Elon, you need to take this call. It's important." He frowned, unsure of what could possibly be more important than his upcoming Mars launch. "I'm busy, Lisa. What's going on?" It's about the homeless crisis. There's a new initiative from the city to address it, and they want you to come in. They're desperate, Elon. They think you can help." A sharp breath caught in his chest. Homelessness was something he had always been aware of. The image of people living on the streets was not foreign to him, but like most others in his circle, he had distanced himself from it. It was a problem that seemed too big to solve, too messy, too complicated. But here it was, knocking at his door. He stared at the wall of his office, lost in thought. He had solved complex problems before. He had revolutionized the automotive industry, changed the face of space travel, and made electric power mainstream. But homelessness? It was something entirely different. "What's the catch?" Elon asked, his tone cautious. "They need someone who can think outside the box, Elon. Someone who can use tech to make a real difference. And well, you're the person they're looking for," Lisa said, her voice steady but firm. Elon felt the weight of the words. Someone who could think outside the box. Could he really do that? Could he apply his engineering mindset to something so human? He had never really seen homelessness as his problem to solve, but now the city was asking him to step in. "All right," Elon said, a quiet resolve settling in. "Put them through." The phone clicked, and for the next hour, Elon listened intently as a series of politicians, activists, and social workers laid out the grim reality of the situation. The statistics were jarring. In 2023, there were nearly 600,000 homeless people in the United States, and the numbers were growing every year. Shelters were full, and despite billions of dollars spent annually, the problem only seemed to worsen. They needed a solution, a breakthrough, a way to create long-term housing that could lift people out of homelessness and prevent them from falling back into it. The voice on the other end of the call was desperate, but also hopeful. It wasn't a politician, or a rich donor, or even a city planner. It was a woman named Monica, who had spent years working on the ground with homeless populations. She had seen firsthand what worked and what didn't, and she was convinced that Elon, with all his resources and influence, could change the game. "Elon," she said, her voice cracking slightly with emotion, "we've tried everything, but no one has ever approached this problem with the kind of thinking you bring to your companies. We need someone who can break the system and build something entirely new." Elon felt a tug at his conscience. He had built his fortune solving big, technological problems: spaceships, electric cars, artificial intelligence. But homelessness wasn't a technical problem, was it? It was a social problem, a humanitarian issue. And yet, something in him stirred. Was there a way to solve this? Could his technology, his vision, make a dent in something as complex as homelessness? "Monica, I'll be honest," he said, his voice low. "I don't know how I can help. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a politician. I'm just a guy who builds cars and rockets. But I'll come meet with you. Maybe we can figure something out." That decision, made in the span of a few minutes, would change everything. As Elon hung up the phone, the weight of the decision hit him. He looked out the window, watching as the morning sun bathed the SpaceX campus in a golden glow. There were so many problems in the world, so many things that needed solving. He could barely keep up with the demands of his own companies, let alone take on something as monumental as homelessness. And yet, this felt different. He walked out to the parking lot, where his Tesla Model S was waiting for him. He wasn't sure what he could do, but he knew one thing. He couldn't just sit back and ignore it. The same way he couldn't sit back and let the world destroy itself with climate change, he couldn't sit back while people were dying on the streets. The drive to the meeting was long, but Elon's mind was racing. He was thinking about everything from new housing models to energy solutions, from affordable living to self-sustaining communities. There had to be a way. If anyone could figure it out, he could. He arrived at the meeting with a sense of purpose, the weight of the world suddenly on his shoulders. As he walked into the conference room, he saw Monica sitting at the head of the table. She stood up when he entered, her face etched with concern, but also an unshakable belief that this could work. The rest of the room was filled with a mix of local politicians, social workers, and urban planners, each one waiting to hear what Elon Musk might say. And for the first time in his life, Elon Musk didn't have all the answers. But something inside him told him that, just maybe, this was the problem he was meant to solve. Do you think someone like Elon Musk can truly make a difference in solving homelessness? Let me know your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to follow this emotional journey. Elon Musk wasn't a stranger to monumental challenges. From an early age, he had been driven by the idea that the world's biggest problems could be solved, one innovation at a time. But the homeless crisis? That was something completely different. Elon's childhood had been anything but conventional. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, his early years were marked by a sense of alienation. His father, Elon Musk, was a brilliant but cold engineer who often pushed Elon to be more than he felt capable of. His mother, May Musk, was a model and dietitian, gracious, supportive, and nurturing. Still, Elon never felt he truly belonged anywhere. At school, he was frequently bullied for being an outsider, and as a result, he buried himself in books and computers, retreating into the world of science fiction and technology. It wasn't until he left South Africa for Canada and later the US that he found his true calling. Over the years, he built companies that would revolutionize industries, from Tesla's electric cars to SpaceX's rockets. But every success had its price. The loneliness that plagued him as a child followed him into adulthood. Despite his immense wealth and fame, Elon often felt isolated. People saw him as an enigma, someone who could push humanity forward into space, yet struggled to connect with others on a personal level. His need for validation wasn't about money or fame. It was about the pursuit of something greater. He wanted to prove that anyone, even someone like him, a socially awkward, often misunderstood outsider, could change the world. But as he stood in the conference room, looking out at the people gathered to solve a crisis he hadn't even considered seriously until now, he felt a pang of doubt. Could he really change something as deeply ingrained as homelessness? Monica, the homeless advocate who had reached out to him, was the first to break the silence. She was a tall woman in her early 40s, with sharp features and a determined expression. Her clothes were simple but smart, nothing extravagant, just practical. As she spoke, her voice was soft, but there was an undeniable force behind her words. Elon, we need your help. We've been trying for decades to come up with solutions to this problem. The shelters are full, the streets are overcrowded, and nothing we've done has worked. The numbers keep growing. People are slipping through the cracks. Elon nodded, taking in her words. He had read the statistics, of course, but it wasn't until now, hearing them directly from someone who had lived and breathed this crisis, that they truly hit home. Monica wasn't just talking about numbers. She was talking about people. Real people with stories, struggles, and dreams that had been forgotten by society. I understand the urgency, Elon replied. His voice was steady, but the weight of the situation was starting to sink in. But I'm not a social worker. I build rockets and electric cars. This is different. Monica leaned forward, locking eyes with him. Exactly. That's why we need you. We need someone who can think outside the box. You've disrupted industries before. Why not this one? Elon felt a flicker of recognition. He had spent years chasing the impossible, going to Mars, making electric cars mainstream, building a hyperloop. These were all ideas that people had scoffed at, saying they were impossible. Yet, here he was, having done it. So, why couldn't he tackle homelessness? After all, if there was one thing Elon knew, it was that no problem was truly unsolvable. But still, he hesitated. The scale of it was overwhelming. Elon could build a rocket to the stars, but how could he help people who had lost everything? One of the city planners, a man in his 50s named Charles, cleared his throat. We've talked about many ideas over the years. Tiny homes, repurposed shipping containers, even large-scale modular apartments. But nothing sticks. We need someone who can bring technology into this space, someone who can create a sustainable solution that's cost-effective and scalable. The idea of scalable caught Elon's attention. That was the key to his success in the past. Everything he did, whether it was with Tesla or SpaceX, had been built with the goal of scalability in mind. He had revolutionized electric cars by making them accessible to the masses, and he had planned the colonization of Mars with the dream of making humanity a multiplanetary species. Could he do the same for homelessness? What if we could build homes that aren't just homes? Elon said, the wheels in his mind already turning. What if we could design sustainable, energy-efficient communities that could function on their own, powered by solar energy, with waste recycling and water conservation systems? What if they were small, portable, and modular? Maybe not just houses, maybe whole communities that could be replicated and scaled. The room went silent. Monica's eyes widened as she absorbed what he was suggesting. You mean something like a self-sustaining neighborhood? A place that's not just a shelter but a real home? A community? Yes, Elon said, growing more excited. A place where people can live, work, and even learn. Think of it like a hybrid between a tiny house and a solar-powered village. It wouldn't just be a roof over their heads. It would be a chance for them to get back on their feet. Jobs, training, education, all within this community. A place where homelessness isn't just about surviving, but about rebuilding. Monica was nearly speechless. That could actually work. But Elon, this is huge. It's going to require so much more than just technology. We'll need partnerships with local governments, funding, and most importantly, we'll need to work closely with the people who have lived this experience. Their input will be critical. I understand that, Elon replied. But I think the key to making this work is treating it like a tech project. A problem that can be solved with the right tools, the right approach, and the right collaboration. The group sat in stunned silence for a moment. Elon's idea was radical, sure, but it wasn't impossible. It was the kind of out-of-the-box thinking that had propelled his career, the same approach that had disrupted multiple industries. Why couldn't it work here, too? Charles spoke up, breaking the silence. It's ambitious, to say the least, but we're willing to give it a shot. If you're serious about this, we'll need to get started immediately. Elon nodded. He wasn't ready to jump in just yet. There were still countless questions to answer, technical, social, logistical, but he could feel it. The spark was there. A new mission, one that was far more personal than anything he had done before. As he left the meeting that day, his mind was racing. He was no longer just thinking about electric cars or rockets to Mars. For the first time, Elon Musk was thinking about how to solve a problem on the ground, a problem that affected millions of people every day. And for the first time in years, he felt like he might actually be on the verge of something truly meaningful. The days following the meeting were a blur of emails, phone calls, and brainstorming sessions. Elon had always thrived in high-pressure environments, but this was different. The usual tech problems he faced were predictable in their scope and solvability. Homelessness, however, was a complex web of social, economic, and psychological issues that didn't come with easy answers. And it wasn't just about building something, it was about rebuilding lives. Elon found himself meeting with an entirely new team of people. There were architects, social workers, construction experts, and even psychologists. The goal? To create a living space that would not only house people, but also offer them a way to reintegrate into society. The idea of creating self-sustaining communities, powered by renewable energy and designed with dignity in mind, began to take form. But, as always, Elon's mind went into overdrive. He wasn't just interested in building shelters or temporary housing. He was interested in creating a long-term solution, a system that could be replicated on a massive scale, a system that could eventually become a model for the rest of the country and even the world. By the end of the week, Elon called a meeting with his core team, the ones who had helped him tackle his past challenges. There was J.B. Straubel, his longtime Tesla partner, who was now focused on energy systems, Gwynne Shotwell, who had helped make SpaceX the powerhouse it was, and others from his various ventures who were known for their problem-solving skills. They gathered in a sleek, minimalist conference room at SpaceX headquarters, the table cluttered with blueprints, prototypes, and presentation slides. Elon stood at the head of the table, pacing as he often did when deep in thought. He could feel the weight of the challenge ahead, but at the same time, a deep sense of excitement began to take root in his chest. "We need a new approach," Elon began, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "This can't just be about building homes. It's about building sustainable communities, places that aren't just for survival, but for a fresh start. People can't live in shelters forever. They need to have access to jobs, healthcare, education, and training. Otherwise, they'll just fall back into the same cycle." Gwynne Shotwell was the first to respond. "I get it, Elon. So, we're talking about creating communities, not just housing. But what does that look like? How do we take that vision and turn it into something tangible?" Elon paused, thinking for a moment before answering. "Think of it as a network of modular, eco-friendly homes. Something that can be scaled, but also personalized to each community's specific needs. These homes would be energy efficient, solar panels on the roof, water recycling systems, maybe even small-scale vertical farming. The goal is not just to give people a place to live, but to provide them with the tools they need to rebuild their lives." J.B. Straubel, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward. "You're talking about more than just tiny homes. You're thinking about an entire ecosystem, a sustainable, integrated model. That's huge." "Exactly," Elon replied, nodding. "We have to think of it as a comprehensive system, not just homes, but a full infrastructure. Solar power, smart technology for managing resources, and a layout that fosters community. We want people to feel like they belong, like they have a chance to succeed, not just survive." The room grew quiet as the team processed what Elon was saying. It was a radical idea, ambitious, yes, but not impossible. They had solved big problems before, and this was just another challenge that required out-of-the-box thinking. But there was one thing that stuck out in Elon's mind: the human element. This wasn't just about the technology. It was about the people. "I want to make sure we're working closely with the people we're trying to help," Elon added, his voice softening for the first time. "We can't just impose something on them. We need to listen to their stories, their struggles. We need to understand their needs." Monica, who had been part of the initial discussions, had suggested bringing in those who had experienced homelessness firsthand. She believed that without their input, any solution would be incomplete. And Elon agreed. He knew that the success of this project would depend on building trust and showing respect for the people it was meant to serve. The team spent the next few weeks in an intensive phase of research and design. They worked with local shelters, talking to people who had been living on the streets for years. They discovered that many of the solutions that were being implemented were, at best, temporary. Shelters were overcrowded, and even those who managed to find housing often lacked the resources to stay off the streets. Without jobs, without education, and without the proper mental health care, people were likely to fall right back into the same cycle of homelessness. But they also discovered something else: a deep desire for community. Many of the people they spoke with longed for a place where they could connect with others, where they could rebuild their lives together. They didn't just want a roof over their heads. They wanted purpose. They wanted dignity. Elon had never been more aware of the complexity of the issue than he was now. He had spent years pushing technology forward, but this was different. It wasn't just about tech. It was about people, about creating a space where they could truly thrive. By the end of the month, they had their first blueprint. It was a set of modular homes, each designed to be energy efficient and self-sustaining. The homes would be arranged in clusters, each with shared spaces for communal activities, gardens, and workspaces. There would be room for growth, for education, and for support. It was an ambitious model, but one that felt achievable. Yet, despite their progress, Elon felt the weight of the challenge ahead. Even with the design in place, They had to convince city officials, lawmakers, and the general public that this was a solution worth pursuing. They needed to secure funding, navigate red tape, and face the inevitable opposition that came with any large-scale project. Elon wasn't worried about the technical side. He knew they could build it. But this wasn't just another product or business venture. This was a movement to change the way society viewed homelessness. As he sat in his office late one night, reviewing the designs and plans on his laptop, he thought back to the meeting with Monica. She had asked him for help, and he had said yes. But this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be like launching a new electric car or sending a rocket to Mars. This was about people, about lives, and about making a real, tangible difference. The journey ahead would be long, and it would test him in ways he never imagined. But Elon Musk had always been drawn to the impossible. And this time, he wasn't just going to shoot for the stars. He was going to bring a little piece of the future down to Earth. The first challenge was never going to be easy. Convincing the people in power that Elon Musk, a tech mogul with no background in social services, had the solution to one of the most entrenched issues in society. Homelessness was an issue that had resisted efforts for decades. Politicians, activists, and advocates alike had all tried to tackle it, but nothing seemed to work on a large scale. Elon knew he needed more than just a good idea. He needed a coalition of support. The next several weeks were spent meeting with city officials, nonprofit leaders, and community organizations. The initial response was mixed. Many were intrigued, but others were skeptical. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Mr. Musk," one city councilman said during an early meeting in Los Angeles. "But this problem isn't as simple as building homes. There are so many factors at play: mental health issues, addiction, unemployment. You can't just throw up modular homes and hope people will get back on their feet." Elon understood the concerns. The issues were complex, and the people who lived on the streets had a variety of needs. But he wasn't about to back down. He had spent years listening to people tell him that something was impossible, only to prove them wrong. "Why should this be any different? I don't think we should be throwing up homes and calling it a solution," Elon replied. "What I'm proposing is a comprehensive system, a community built from the ground up, with housing, training, jobs, education, and healthcare. It's not just about the physical space. It's about creating a sustainable ecosystem where people can thrive." The city councilman paused, visibly considering the idea. "It's a bold plan," he said slowly. "I'll give you that. But how do you plan to fund it? This isn't something we can afford on a whim." Elon had expected this. Money, as always, was going to be an issue. But he had a plan for that too. "I'll put in the initial investment," he said, "and I'll work with investors and partners who are willing to fund the project. Once we prove the concept, the model can be replicated across the country. It'll be scalable." The meeting ended with no guarantees, but it wasn't a complete failure. They had opened the door to further discussions, and that was all Elon needed for now. His next target was securing funding, both from private investors and from the government. He knew it would take both to get this off the ground. Back at his headquarters, Elon gathered his team together for an update. The room was filled with familiar faces, his key advisors and engineers from Tesla and SpaceX. They were used to working on rockets, electric cars, and high-tech solutions. This, however, was new territory for all of them. "How are we doing on the prototypes?" Elon asked, his tone focused but still carrying the sense of urgency that always accompanied his projects. J.B. Straubel stood up, adjusting his glasses as he went over the latest designs. "We've got the first round of modular homes ready for testing. These are designed to be easily transported and assembled, and they incorporate the latest in energy efficiency. Solar panels, water recycling, waste management systems, everything we talked about. But we need to test them in real conditions." Gwynne Shotwell nodded. "We've also been working with local builders who have experience with modular construction. The goal is to keep costs low while maintaining the highest standards of quality. We're not just building homes, we're creating a new way of living." Elon smiled, satisfied with the progress. They were getting closer to the launch of the first prototype. But this wasn't just about the homes. It was about creating a system that would work long-term, one that would help people not just survive, but thrive. "We need to partner with social workers and mental health experts," Elon said. "We've got the tech, but we can't forget the human aspect. These people need more than just a roof over their heads. They need support, psychological, social, and economic. Monica, who had become a crucial part of the team, spoke up from the back of the room. We've reached out to local shelters and crisis intervention centers. There's a real willingness to collaborate. But we have to make sure we're not just offering a handout, we're offering a chance to rebuild. That means giving people the resources they need to regain their independence. Elon nodded thoughtfully. Exactly. We're not creating a dependency, we're creating an opportunity. And that starts with the way we design these communities. We want people to feel empowered, not ashamed. With the prototype homes and initial designs in place, Elon and his team set their sights on the next hurdle. Getting the public behind the project. They needed a plan to show the world that this wasn't just a pipe dream. Elon's influence and reputation could only take them so far. Now, it was time for the community to see the tangible benefits of the project. The first step was a public event. Elon had always been known for his ability to generate buzz, and this event would be no different. It wasn't just a typical press conference. Instead, it was designed to demonstrate the real-world potential of what they were building. The event was held in a sprawling, empty lot just outside of Los Angeles, a place that had long been known as a gathering point for people experiencing homelessness. For this one day, the lot would be transformed. A series of mock-up modular homes were set up, surrounded by green spaces and communal areas. There was even a small garden where local volunteers had been working to grow food. It wasn't the final version, but it was enough to spark curiosity. Elon stood at the front of the crowd, flanked by Monica and other community leaders. A dozen reporters and photographers were on hand, capturing the scene. Elon knew that this event was as much about image as it was about substance. If they could get the media and the public excited, they would have the momentum to push forward. Today, we're not just talking about building homes, Elon said, his voice steady but passionate. We're talking about building communities. We're talking about giving people the chance to rebuild their lives. This is just the beginning, but I believe it's a beginning that can change everything. The crowd was quiet, absorbing his words. Then, a voice from the back shouted, "How can we help?" Elon smiled. By supporting this initiative, by spreading the word, by believing that we can do better for those who are struggling. The response was overwhelming. People applauded, and the press coverage was immediate. The photos of the modular homes, the community spaces, and the hopeful faces of those who had been part of the project were splashed across news outlets, sparking discussions from every corner of the country. By the time the event was over, Elon knew that this was no longer just a project, it was a movement. There would be challenges ahead. They still needed funding, political support, and a way to scale the solution quickly. But the first steps had been taken, and the momentum was building. The journey to solving homelessness had just begun, and Elon Musk had committed himself fully to it. The question now wasn't whether they could do it. The question was, how fast could they make it happen? The initial enthusiasm surrounding Elon Musk's plan to address homelessness quickly transitioned from optimism to reality. While public interest had been high and the first prototype homes had generated plenty of buzz, the path forward was anything but smooth. With every win came new hurdles, bureaucratic red tape, financial roadblocks, and growing opposition from groups who had their own vision for solving homelessness. It wasn't long before the naysayers began to make their voices heard. Elon had expected resistance from the political establishment. After all, new solutions often face skepticism, especially when they come from someone with no experience in the field. But what surprised him was the opposition from within the very community they were trying to help. Nonprofits, social workers, and activists who had been entrenched in the issue for years voiced concerns that Elon's project, for all its ambition, was still too tech-driven and detached from the real, lived experience of homelessness. At a public meeting in San Francisco, one prominent homelessness advocate stood up and addressed Elon directly. "What you're offering," she said, her voice thick with frustration, "is not a solution. It's a band-aid. You can't just build shiny new homes and expect that's going to fix the underlying issues. People need more than roofs over their heads. They need job training, mental health services, and support systems. You can't just solve this with solar panels and smart tech." Elon's response was measured. "I understand that," he said calmly. "I've never said this is the final answer. It's a start. But we're not just putting up modular homes. We're designing a whole ecosystem that will offer the tools necessary for people to reintegrate into society. It's not about technology for technology's sake. It's about creating the infrastructure that can give people a chance. The activist wasn't convinced, and the tension in the room was palpable. Elon had expected more discussions like this, but it still stung. He had been a disruptor in the tech world, but this was different. He wasn't just proposing a new electric car or a reusable rocket. He was trying to change lives, to tackle a social crisis that had been decades in the making. Monica, who had become one of Elon's closest allies in the project, leaned over and whispered, "Don't let them get to you. They're scared of change." Elon nodded, taking a deep breath. This was the hard part, the part where his vision, for all its promise, had to face the reality of years of entrenched attitudes and institutional inertia. Despite the criticism, the project moved forward. Elon's team continued to refine the prototype homes, working with psychologists, social workers, and healthcare experts to ensure that the design was as comprehensive as possible. They knew that the homes couldn't just be shelters. They needed to be a space for healing, growth, and transformation. Gwen Shotwell played a key role in keeping the project moving forward, using her leadership skills to manage partnerships and secure funding. "We're going to have to push this through every level," she told Elon during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "But we can do it. We've done it before." Meanwhile, J.B. Straubel, who had been working with energy experts to perfect the solar systems and waste management, was enthusiastic about the technology they were incorporating. "This isn't just about the homes being affordable," he said. "It's about making them self-sustaining. These people won't just have a place to live. They'll have the freedom to thrive in an environment that gives them the resources to succeed." But despite all of this, there was still a lingering doubt that Elon couldn't shake. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that, to make this vision a reality, they needed to do more than just solve the physical problem of housing. They needed to address the deeper, more complex issues that led to homelessness in the first place: addiction, mental health struggles, and unemployment. Without a holistic solution, any effort to help would likely fall short. And the truth was, even if they succeeded in building these communities, there was still no guarantee that the residents would be able to stay. Success in addressing homelessness wouldn't just be about getting people off the streets. It would be about helping them stay off the streets for good. As Elon's team continued to work on refining the concept, he received a call from a familiar voice, President Andrews, the President of the United States. The two had met on a few occasions, primarily when Elon had advocated for more government investment in renewable energy and electric cars. "Elon," the president said, his voice grave, "I've been following your project, and I'm impressed. But I've got to be honest with you. There are a lot of people in the administration who are skeptical. You're talking about rolling this out on a massive scale, but there are so many logistical and legal issues involved. Not to mention the political backlash from those who believe that government should be handling homelessness in a different way." Elon wasn't surprised. Government bureaucracy was always a challenge, but he wasn't about to back down now. "I understand the concerns, Mr. President," he said, "but this isn't just about a new way of building homes. It's about creating a model for the entire country. If we can prove this works in one city, then we have the opportunity to roll it out nationwide. It's scalable, and it's going to make a huge difference in the lives of people who are stuck in this cycle." The president was silent for a moment. "You've got a point, Elon, but you're also up against a lot of powerful interests. This won't be easy. Are you prepared for the fight that's coming?" Elon hesitated, then answered with a quiet determination. "I've always been prepared for a fight, Mr. President, but I'm not in this for the fight. I'm in this to win." Days later, the team met to discuss their next steps. The first big challenge was political. Elon and his team would have to navigate the complexities of public policy, local zoning laws, and regulatory approval. But there were also technical challenges. They were about to begin building the first full-scale community, and there were still so many unknowns. "We need to prove this model," Elon said during a team meeting. "We've got one chance to make this work, and it has to be flawless. If we can show that this works in one community, then the rest will follow." Monica spoke up. "We've been talking to local governments, and they're intrigued. But there are still concerns. We'll need to be transparent about the costs, the timelines, and the long-term impacts. We also have to make sure the residents are involved in the planning process. They need to feel like this is their community, not something imposed on them. Elon nodded. He had always believed that technology alone could never solve the world's problems. It was the people, their needs, their voices, that mattered most. Despite the growing resistance, the team pushed forward. They identified their first site in Los Angeles, a large, empty lot that had been an eyesore for years. It was a place that had long been associated with homelessness, abandoned buildings, and makeshift camps. But now, it would become the site of something revolutionary. The groundwork had been laid. The first modular homes would be constructed, and the first community built. But Elon knew that this was only the beginning. The real test would come when they tried to scale the project, when they had to prove that the model they had developed could work not just in one city, but in cities all across the country. The tension in the room was palpable as Elon Musk walked through the construction site for the first time. It was early in the morning, the sun still low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty lot that had been a symbol of neglect and despair for so long. Today, though, the site was alive with activity. Workers moved efficiently, setting up foundations for the first modular homes. It was a momentous occasion, but one that was far from guaranteed. If they succeeded, it would be a beacon of hope for people experiencing homelessness across the country. But if they failed, the repercussions would be far-reaching. Elon surveyed the scene with a mix of determination and uncertainty. The prototypes had been a success, but this was real, no second chances. They had committed to a community model that blended innovation with compassion. The homes weren't just structures, they were designed to be a lifeline. Still, as with any ambitious project, the challenges were mounting. Every decision felt critical. This is where it all starts, Elon muttered to himself, more to reassure his own nerves than anyone else. Monica, who had become one of his closest allies throughout this journey, walked beside him. "We've got this, Elon. We've been planning for months. It's happening." But even as Monica spoke with confidence, the project was far from free of obstacles. Elon had become intimately familiar with the process of getting things done. He was no stranger to difficult problems, after all. But this was different. It wasn't about rockets, electric cars, or AI. This was about people, the most vulnerable members of society. If he got this wrong, the consequences were far more personal. As the days passed, construction on the first site began to take shape. The modular homes, designed with both functionality and comfort in mind, were slowly being assembled, piece by piece. Each unit was solar-powered, equipped with water filtration systems, and designed to minimize waste. The team had worked tirelessly to ensure that these homes weren't just shelters, they were micro-communities. But even as the homes began to take form, a new challenge emerged: the question of how to integrate support services effectively. Elon had always understood the need for healthcare, job training, and mental health support in addressing homelessness, but translating those ideas into a functional, scalable system was much harder than he had imagined. There was no shortage of experts in each of these fields, but bringing them together into a cohesive plan was another matter. Monica, as always, had the practical approach. "We need to build partnerships with local service providers," she suggested. "Social workers, therapists, healthcare professionals, people who can come in and work directly with the residents. It can't just be about the homes. These people need rehabilitation, job skills, and education." Elon agreed, but there was another hurdle: how to make these services accessible. It wasn't enough to simply bring people to the community. They had to be welcomed into an environment that didn't feel like a charity, but a fresh start. Meanwhile, the political resistance didn't stop. While the first prototype was under construction, government officials continued to question the scalability of Elon's model. How could a billionaire tech mogul come in and promise to solve an issue that had stumped social workers and government officials for decades? There was a feeling, among some of the politicians, that Elon was making grand promises without understanding the underlying causes of homelessness. In a meeting with the mayor of Los Angeles, a man known for his progressive stance on social issues, Elon faced more difficult questions. "Your vision is commendable, Mr. Musk," the mayor said, "but there are so many variables. Homelessness is caused by a complex web of factors. Do you really think you can solve it with modular homes?" Elon leaned forward, his voice calm but insistent. "I don't think anyone can solve homelessness in one swoop, but I believe we can give people a fighting chance. These homes aren't just houses, they're part of a larger system. Job training, healthcare, therapy, and community support. All of it working together to give people a real shot at a future." The mayor remained unconvinced. "I don't doubt your intentions, Elon, but we've seen failed programs before. What makes you think this will work where others have failed?" Elon didn't back down. "Because we're not just building a house, we're building a community. We're creating an environment where people can heal, learn, and thrive. If you're going to judge the idea based on what's been done in the past, then we're already lost. We have to try something new." The mayor sighed, clearly frustrated. "I'll support this, but we need to see proof. People in my district are counting on us. We can't afford to gamble with their lives." Elon's team had anticipated this kind of resistance, but it still stung. They had no guarantees, but they believed in the system they were building. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, one that could evolve and improve with time. As the construction of the homes continued, a quiet optimism began to settle over the project. The first modular homes were completed, and the surrounding community center, where social services would be provided, started to take shape. The area, once an eyesore, was transforming before their eyes. A small group of residents, many of whom had been living on the streets for years, began to move into the first units. It was a slow process. Many were hesitant to accept the help. For some, the idea of moving into a new home felt foreign and even threatening. After years of living on the streets, the sense of stability could be more daunting than liberating. But as more people moved in, something remarkable began to happen. The first residents of the new community began to help each other. They worked together to unpack, shared advice, and slowly started to build bonds. It was clear that the environment Elon and his team were fostering was beginning to have an impact. For the first time in years, many of these individuals were no longer isolated. They were part of something larger. Monica noticed it first. She saw a group of new residents gathered in the common area, laughing and sharing stories. "They're already forming a community," she remarked, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Elon, who had been watching from a distance, smiled softly. "This is just the beginning." But even as the project gained momentum, there was still work to be done. One of the most difficult challenges was integrating the various social services into the community. Elon's team worked closely with psychologists, healthcare workers, and job training providers to create a seamless process that allowed residents to access the help they needed without feeling stigmatized. The hope was that, over time, the community would become self-sustaining. The residents would be given the tools to rebuild their lives, but it was clear that they would need continued support. Some would succeed quickly, others would take time. But the real success would be in seeing a community rise from the ashes of neglect. For Elon, the stakes were personal. This wasn't just another project. This was his chance to make a real difference, to show that technology, innovation, and compassion could work hand in hand. As the first few weeks passed, Elon saw small signs of success. The residents were starting to take pride in their new homes. They were helping each other in ways that went beyond what was expected. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. The first few months after the first modular homes were completed felt like a whirlwind. The project was moving forward, and Elon Musk's team worked tirelessly to ensure that the vision was taking shape as they had hoped. The homes were functional, comfortable, and well-equipped to provide the basic needs of the residents: a safe space, clean water, solar power, and community support. But as the first group of formerly homeless individuals moved in, it became clear that the road to recovery was far from easy. There was excitement, of course. People who had been living on the streets for years finally had a roof over their heads, a sense of security, and a chance to rebuild their lives. But there was also resistance. For some, it was hard to adjust to the stability that the new homes provided. After years of living day to day, constantly moving from one temporary shelter to another, many found it difficult to embrace the idea of permanence. The mental and emotional toll of homelessness was deep, and the transition was not as simple as moving into a new home. As Elon walked through the community one afternoon, he couldn't help but notice the mixed reactions. In one corner, a group of residents gathered in the community center, laughing and chatting, making plans for the future. In another, a woman sat alone on the steps of her modular home, her head down, lost in thought. "How's she doing?" Elon asked Monica, who had been working closely with the residents to ensure their smooth transition. Monica paused for a moment, then answered carefully. "Her name's Sarah. She's been on the streets for over a decade. We've been helping her with therapy and job training, but she's having a hard time trusting that things can be different now. It's going to take time." Elon nodded, understanding the complexity of the situation. He had always known that homelessness was more than just a housing issue. It was about rebuilding a person's sense of self-worth, their trust in the system, and their belief in a better future. The struggles of the residents were not unique to Sarah. Many of them, despite being given the physical resources they needed, were still grappling with the psychological scars left by years of living in survival mode. Substance abuse, mental health issues, and the lingering effects of trauma made the process of reintegration challenging. Elon had always believed in the power of technology and innovation to solve big problems, but this was a different kind of problem, a human problem. And that was something that no amount of technology could fix on its own. To help with the transition, the team implemented a series of programs designed to ease the adjustment. Social workers, mental health professionals, and addiction counselors were brought in to work with the residents individually. They focused on creating a supportive environment where people felt comfortable asking for help, but also empowered to take the necessary steps toward independence. Monica spent much of her time coordinating these efforts. She worked closely with each resident, helping them set goals, find meaningful employment, and connect with resources. It wasn't easy, but it was a critical part of the mission. But there was another issue that Elon hadn't anticipated: the lack of community buy-in. While some residents were embracing their new homes, many of the neighbors in the surrounding area were less than thrilled. For years, the lot had been a blight on the neighborhood, but its transformation into a vibrant community brought with it new challenges. Elon's project had always been about more than just providing homes. It was about reintegrating the homeless into society. But some of the long-term residents of the neighborhood were concerned about the influx of people with no permanent address. They feared that crime would rise, that property values would drop, or that the area would become a magnet for more homeless people. One evening, as Elon was attending a local council meeting, these concerns came to the forefront. A group of local residents spoke out against the project, voicing their concerns about the perceived risks. "We understand that you're trying to help," one resident said, his voice laced with frustration, "but this is going to change the character of our neighborhood. It's already tough enough around here, and now you're bringing in people who have been living on the streets for years. How can we be sure this will work?" Elon, who had grown accustomed to resistance in his other ventures, stood up to respond. "I understand your concerns, and I assure you that we are committed to creating a safe, productive community here. These aren't just homeless people. They're people who have been given a second chance. We're building not just homes, but a future. And I believe that, in time, this community will be stronger because of it." The room was quiet for a moment, but the skepticism was palpable. Elon knew that changing perceptions would be as difficult as changing the lives of the residents themselves. To help ease the tension, the team decided to hold a community event, an open house of sorts, where local residents could come in, meet the people living in the new homes, and see firsthand what the project was all about. It was an attempt to build bridges between the new residents and the surrounding community, showing them that this wasn't just about charity, it was about revitalizing the neighborhood as a whole. The event was a modest success. Many of the local residents who attended were surprised by how clean, organized, and well-maintained the homes were. They met residents who were eager to share their stories, telling them how the homes had given them hope for the first time in years. There was even a moment when a local shopkeeper spoke to one of the residents and offered them a part-time job at his store. Still, there were those who remained unconvinced. They worried about the long-term effects of the project, about the possibility that it would attract more homeless individuals to the area. But even some of the skeptics began to soften, seeing the humanity behind the initiative and recognizing that they were part of something much larger than they had initially realized. In the weeks that followed, Elon and Monica began to see the fruits of their labor. The residents who had been reluctant to accept help were slowly opening up. Sarah, the woman who had been sitting on her steps alone when Elon first visited, started attending therapy sessions more regularly. She began to engage with her neighbors, and little by little, she started to regain some of her lost confidence. The other residents were showing similar signs of progress. They were working together to create a sense of community, sharing resources and looking out for each other. There were still plenty of setbacks, addiction relapses, emotional breakdowns, and moments of doubt. But overall, the sense of unity was growing. Elon spent more time visiting the community, meeting with residents, and listening to their stories. It was in these moments that he saw the true potential of the project. This wasn't just about building homes. It was about creating a place where people could heal, rebuild, and thrive. As Elon looked over the community for the first time in weeks, he felt a deep sense of pride. This was the beginning of something bigger than himself, something that could have a ripple effect across the entire country. But he also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There were still political hurdles, financial challenges, and the undeniable truth that homelessness was a problem much deeper than any one project could fix. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a renewed sense of hope. As the weeks passed, the momentum of Elon Musk's project began to build, but so too did the resistance. The homes were still under construction, but the first residents were beginning to integrate into their new surroundings. While most were adjusting to their new lives, there were those who couldn't escape the deep-seated trauma of their past. For them, the promise of a new beginning felt more like a burden than a blessing. Sarah, the woman who had been hesitant to trust the system, had made small strides since the community event. She started working part-time at a local cafe and was slowly engaging in therapy. But the weight of her past was never far behind. Some days, it was all she could do to stay out of bed, let alone face the challenges of finding stability. There were moments when she relapsed into old habits, retreating to the isolation that had once felt so familiar. Sarah wasn't alone. Across the community, others were facing similar struggles. The question of whether this project would work, the question that had always hung over Elon's head, loomed larger than ever. Could they truly overcome the invisible scars of homelessness, or would the weight of the past continue to pull them back into the abyss? Elon knew that the technical side of things was in place. The homes were built to last. The solar panels worked, the plumbing was functional, and the modular units were equipped with everything necessary to support sustainable living. But he also knew that creating real change would take more than just infrastructure. It would take time, trust, and healing. As Elon sat in his office late one night, reviewing the latest data on the project's progress, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more needed to be done. The community was growing, but it was still fragile. He understood now, more than ever, that homelessness wasn't just about a lack of shelter. It was about a lack of opportunity, a lack of community, and often, a lack of hope. And that's when the idea hit him. What if we created an incubator for these people? Elon mused aloud, staring at the blueprint for the community center. A place where they can not only live but thrive. Where they can be trained for jobs, learn new skills, and build a future together. What if we gave them the tools to be entrepreneurs, to give back to the community in a way that was sustainable? He had always believed in the power of innovation to solve big problems, but this was different. This wasn't just about building a better car or sending a rocket to Mars. It was about building people up, giving them the agency to control their own destinies. Elon had seen firsthand how technology could help transform industries. What if it could do the same for individuals who had lost everything? He turned to Monica, who was sitting across from him, poring over reports. What do you think of this, an incubator program? We can provide job training, mentoring, and access to capital for residents who want to start their own businesses. It could be a way to give people a sense of purpose. Monica looked up, her brow furrowed in thought. It's a brilliant idea, Elon, but it's also a huge leap. These people have been homeless for years. It's going to take a lot of trust building to get them to believe they can succeed in something like that. Elon nodded. I know, but that's the point. If we only focus on giving them basic shelter, we're not doing enough. We need to provide a way out, something that gives them dignity and purpose. It could be the game changer. The idea of the incubator began to take shape. Elon and Monica reached out to several local organizations and entrepreneurs who had experience working with marginalized communities. Together, they would design a program that offered residents the chance to gain skills, start small businesses, and even offer products and services to the local area. It would be a place for growth, both personal and professional. The community center, which had been primarily a space for social services and therapy, would now serve as the hub for this new initiative. A portion of the center would be transformed into classrooms for job training and business development. There would be mentorship programs where successful entrepreneurs from various industries could volunteer their time. And most importantly, there would be a focus on sustainability, teaching residents how to build long-term careers, not just short-term jobs. But as exciting as this new initiative was, it wasn't without its challenges. The residents weren't used to thinking in terms of long-term goals. They were survivors, living day to day, and many of them struggled to see beyond their immediate needs. Sarah, who had been doing better in her job at the cafe, was invited to join one of the incubator's first workshops. She hesitated at first, unsure if she could balance her new job with the pressures of learning new skills. But Monica, who had worked closely with Sarah, encouraged her to take the leap. "You're already on the right track, Sarah. This is just one more step toward building the life you've always wanted. You don't have to do it all at once, but taking one step forward can make all the difference." Sarah finally agreed, and soon she found herself sitting in a classroom, listening to a local entrepreneur talk about the basics of small business management. The concepts were foreign to her: marketing, customer acquisition, branding. But there was something in the way the instructor spoke that sparked a glimmer of hope. "This isn't just about business," the instructor said. "This is about understanding that you have the power to change your own future. You're not bound by your past. You can create something new, something that reflects your own journey." For Sarah, it was a revelation. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of agency. She had been living in the shadow of her past for so long, and now she was starting to see a way forward. The incubator program started small, with just a few residents showing interest. But as the weeks went on, more and more people began to attend the workshops and sign up for mentorship. The community center was buzzing with activity as residents shared ideas, collaborated on projects, and learned new skills that would help them build better futures. But not all residents were as quick to embrace the new opportunities. Some of them still clung to the belief that their circumstances would never change. They were skeptical of the idea that they could ever truly succeed outside of their survival mode. And there were moments when the weight of their doubts threatened to overshadow the progress that had been made. One evening, as Elon was walking through the community, he ran into James, a resident who had been living in the shelter for years before moving into one of the homes. James had been one of the most resistant to the idea of the incubator program. "I don't know, Elon," James said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've been to these programs before. I've tried. I've worked jobs, but I can't get ahead. The world just keeps knocking me down." Elon paused, looking at James with a mix of understanding and resolve. "I know, James. It's hard, but this is different. We're not asking you to do it alone. We're here to support you every step of the way." James sighed, shaking his head. "I don't know if I can trust it." Elon placed a hand on his shoulder. "Trust doesn't come easy, especially when you've been let down before. But I promise you this. If you give it a chance, you'll see that things can be different. Not overnight, but step by step." Elon knew that this was just the beginning. There would be setbacks, failures, and challenges along the way. But if there was one thing he had learned in his life, it was that change wasn't easy. It took time, persistence, and a willingness to adapt. As he looked around the community, he saw something he hadn't seen in the beginning: a sense of possibility. The residents were beginning to believe in themselves, one small victory at a time. And that, more than anything else, was the key to making this project a success. As the months passed, the incubator program began to show signs of promise. Residents were attending workshops, participating in mentorship, and slowly starting to believe that change could be possible. But despite the growing momentum, the cracks were starting to show. The emotional weight of the transition was heavier than anyone had anticipated. While some residents thrived, others, like Sarah, felt themselves pulled back into the familiar spiral of doubt and fear. For Sarah, the workshops had been a revelation, but it wasn't long before she hit a wall. The excitement she had initially felt began to fade as the pressures of her new life took hold. The cafe job that had once felt like a stepping stone now felt like a weight. There were days when it seemed easier to retreat to the shadows of the past than to face the overwhelming task of rebuilding her future. One evening, as Sarah was sitting in her small but cozy new home, she stared at the pile of job applications she had been filling out for weeks. Her hands trembled as she picked up another one, her thoughts clouded by doubt. What if I'm not cut out for this? What if I fail again? The memories of the years she had spent on the streets loomed large in her mind, a constant reminder of her perceived inadequacy. It wasn't until the doorbell rang that Sarah snapped out of her thoughts. She hesitated for a moment, wiping her tears, before answering. It was Monica, standing there with a smile and a warm cup of tea. "I figured you might need some company," Monica said gently, stepping inside. Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "I don't know how to do this anymore, Monica. It's like I'm stuck in this cycle. I try to move forward, and then something happens, and I end up right where I started." Monica sat down next to her, placing the tea on the table. "You're not stuck, Sarah. You're just in a rough patch. It happens to everyone. Progress isn't linear, and healing is messy. But every step you take, no matter how small, is one more step away from the past. You're doing it, even if it doesn't feel like it." Sarah wiped her eyes. "But I don't know if I can keep doing it. It feels like the weight is too much." Monica placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. We're here with you, and we believe in you. The next step might be hard, but I know you can take it." While Sarah struggled, other residents of the community were experiencing breakthroughs of their own. James, the man who had initially been skeptical of the incubator program, had a chance encounter with a local businessman named Tom, who had been volunteering at the community center to mentor aspiring entrepreneurs. James had been standing near the community center one afternoon, nervously watching people come and go from the incubator workshops. He hadn't yet worked up the courage to attend one himself, but when Tom stopped to chat with him, something clicked. "You look like you've got something on your mind," Tom said, offering James a friendly smile. "I don't know if I can make it work," James said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I've tried before. I've worked hard, but it never seems to get me anywhere. I'm not sure I have the skills or the luck to start anything." Tom raised an eyebrow. "You know, a lot of people have told me the same thing. The ones who make it are the ones who push through the doubts. It's not about luck, it's about persistence. And sometimes, it's about finding the right opportunity. But you've got to be willing to take that first step." James looked at Tom, considering his words. "What if I fail?" Tom laughed softly. "Failure isn't the end, my friend. It's just the beginning of learning. I've failed more times than I can count, and each failure has been a stepping stone to success." Something in Tom's words struck a chord with James. The idea of failure as a lesson, not a setback, felt like a revelation. It was a new way of thinking, and for the first time in a long time, James felt a flicker of hope. The following week, James decided to attend one of the incubator workshops. It wasn't easy. His nerves were on edge, and he still wasn't sure what he was doing. But something about Tom's words pushed him forward. The workshop, led by a local marketing expert named Lisa, focused on how to turn a small business idea into something viable. Lisa was kind but firm, encouraging each resident to think about what they were passionate about and how that could translate into a business. When she asked James what he enjoyed doing, he surprised himself by answering, "I like fixing things. I've been repairing bikes for years, just for fun." Lisa smiled. "That's a great place to start. What's stopping you from turning that into a business?" James hesitated. "I don't know. I've never thought of it that way." "Well, maybe it's time you did," Lisa replied. "You already have the skills. You just need to think about how to market them and build a customer base. The rest, we'll work on together." By the end of the workshop, James had a rough idea for a business, a mobile bike repair service. He left feeling more confident than he had in years, with a sense of direction that had been missing from his life for so long. Despite these individual successes, the program still faced significant challenges. Not everyone was ready to embrace the opportunities that had been presented to them. The emotional toll of homelessness ran deep, and many residents still struggled with feelings of worthlessness and fear. It was easy to fall into the trap of self-doubt, especially when faced with a system that had failed them time and time again. Elon, too, felt the strain. As the project grew, so did the complexity of managing the multiple facets: housing, mental health, job training, community integration. He had always thrived under pressure, but the weight of knowing that so many lives were depending on the success of this project was beginning to wear on him. One evening, after a long day of meetings and site visits, Elon sat alone in his office. He stared at the plans for the next phase of the project: expanding the community, bringing in more homes, and increasing the capacity of the incubator. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. Is it enough? Are we really doing enough? He picked up his phone and dialed Monica's number. Monica, how's it going with the residents? Are they really making progress? Elon asked, his voice tinged with exhaustion. They are, Monica said, her tone reassuring. It's slow, but it's happening. There are breakthroughs every day, big and small. Sarah, James, even some of the others, they're starting to believe in themselves. Elon let out a breath, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. I just want to make sure we're doing everything we can. These people deserve so much more than just a roof over their heads. They deserve to be seen, to be empowered. They are being seen, Elon, Monica replied, and they're starting to see themselves in a new light. The road to healing, for both the residents and the project itself, was long and winding. There were moments of doubt, frustration, and setbacks. But there were also moments of profound change. Moments when the light at the end of the tunnel began to shine just a little bit brighter. What do you think about James' breakthrough moment? How important is it to have someone believe in you when you're facing the unknown? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. This journey is far from over. As the weeks stretched on, a new wave of energy began to sweep through the community. The first signs of true transformation, both personal and collective, began to emerge. People were learning to lean on each other in ways they hadn't before. The incubator program was helping many take their first steps toward self-sufficiency, but something even more profound was happening. The people who had once lived isolated, fractured lives were starting to form bonds that went beyond mere survival. They were beginning to become a community. For Sarah, this sense of connection was both a relief and a challenge. After months of feeling like she was walking a lonely path, she was finding herself increasingly involved in the lives of others. She had started attending group therapy sessions, where she met people who shared similar struggles. People who had been living on the streets, people who had lost everything, people who felt like they were starting from scratch, just like her. One evening, after a particularly difficult therapy session, Sarah sat on a bench outside the community center, lost in thought. She was still uncertain about her own future, still wrestling with feelings of inadequacy, but there was something different about her. A spark of hope, however faint, flickered within her. She had heard the stories of others, people who had come from broken homes or years of hardship, and how they had begun to rebuild their lives with the support of the community. It was a story she never thought she could be part of, but now, she wasn't so sure. Maybe, just maybe, she could be. Her train of thought was interrupted when she saw James walking toward her, a huge smile on his face. "Hey, Sarah," he called out. "Guess what? I got my first real customer for the bike repair business." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Wait, really? That's amazing, James. How did it happen?" "I was fixing a bike for someone in the community, and they mentioned that their neighbor had a flat tire. Next thing I know, I'm fixing bikes for 2 people. Word's starting to spread." James laughed, shaking his head in disbelief. "I never thought it'd happen this quickly." Sarah smiled, genuinely happy for him. "That's incredible. You've come a long way, James." James shrugged, trying to downplay his success. "I've still got a long way to go, but I'm proud of myself for sticking with it." "You should be," Sarah said. "It's amazing to see you make it happen." As the two of them talked, it struck Sarah how much she had changed in such a short time. She had always been used to watching people succeed from a distance, convinced she wasn't capable of doing the same. But now, seeing James, someone she'd once viewed as struggling just like her, achieve his goals, gave her a sense of possibility she hadn't had before. Meanwhile, Elon was wrestling with a different set of challenges. Though the project was making great strides, he had become increasingly aware of the systemic issues that went beyond just providing shelter or job opportunities. The public perception of the program, the challenges of mental health, and the complexities of poverty were all variables that played a huge role in determining the success of the project. One evening, he sat in his office, surrounded by reports and updates. Monica had just left after another long day of working with the residents, and Elon was reflecting on everything that had happened so far. "We've made so much progress," he said aloud, more to himself than anyone else, "but it still feels like we're just scratching the surface. How do we truly address the root causes of homelessness?" Elon had always believed that innovation could solve problems, but homelessness wasn't just about a lack of resources. It was about isolation, trauma, and the broken systems that perpetuated the cycle. As much as the community's progress gave him hope, he knew that to break the cycle permanently, there had to be a fundamental shift in how society viewed and treated those who had fallen through the cracks. Monica's voice interrupted his thoughts as she knocked and entered the room. "I know you're thinking about the bigger picture, Elon, and I get it. This project is so much more than just housing," she said, sitting down across from him. "But you also have to recognize how far we've come. Look at Sarah and James. Look at the way people are beginning to trust again, to rebuild. We're not just building homes, we're building lives. And that's powerful." Elon looked at Monica, a sense of gratitude and relief in his eyes. "I know. I just wish we could do more, faster. There's still so much to be done." Monica smiled softly. "You're always going to feel like that. But sometimes the most important thing is to be patient with the process. These people have been through so much, and their healing isn't going to happen overnight. But every day they're here, they're one step closer." Elon took a deep breath, leaning back in his chair. "I just wish there was a way to break down the walls faster, make it easier for them to see that change is possible, that they can get out of the cycle. So many people are stuck in their heads, in their trauma, in the belief that they can't get out. I want to help them break through that." Monica nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "The only way to break through those walls is to build trust. It's not just about what we give them, it's about showing them that they matter, that they're worthy of a future." As the project moved into its second year, the community began to take on a life of its own. The incubator program continued to grow, with more and more residents participating in workshops, honing skills, and launching small businesses. Some had even begun to hire fellow residents, creating an environment of mutual support. The network of relationships that had once been broken and strained was slowly being repaired, and residents were starting to feel the power of community. Sarah, inspired by James' success, finally decided to take her own leap. After months of hesitation, she enrolled in a graphic design course at the local community college, using the skills she had gained from the workshops to pursue her own passion. It wasn't easy. She had to balance work, school, and her personal struggles, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was moving forward. And with the encouragement of her new friends in the community, she felt empowered to keep going. However, as much as the community was thriving, there were still significant challenges. The program's success was being scrutinized by local government officials and city leaders. While many were impressed by the project's results, others remained skeptical, questioning whether the model could scale or if it was truly sustainable in the long term. Elon had always known that the road to systemic change would be full of obstacles, but the pressure was starting to build. One day, Elon received a call that he knew was coming but had hoped would never come. A city council member, who had initially supported the project, was pulling funding due to concerns about the feasibility of scaling the initiative. The pressure from outside forces was beginning to take its toll, and Elon had to decide whether he was willing to fight for the future of the project or walk away. Sitting in his office, Elon stared at the message on his phone. This could be the end of it all, or it could be the beginning of something even bigger. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. This journey was far from over. The pressure was mounting, and Elon felt it in every fiber of his being. The funding cut was a blow, but not the end. He had always known that changing the system would be a battle, but now it was personal. This project, this dream of giving the homeless a chance at a new life, had to succeed, not just for the people in the program, but for the idea that real transformation was possible. The stakes had never been higher. Elon didn't sleep much that night. His mind kept racing, flipping through potential strategies, talking points, and ways to convince the city council that this program wasn't just a temporary fix. It was a sustainable model for long-term change. If he could convince them to reinvest in the project, there was a chance to scale it, to offer this opportunity to even more people. But if he failed, the consequences would be devastating, not just for the residents, but for the many others in the city who had been living on the streets, waiting for someone to care enough to make a real difference. Meanwhile, the residents of the community were unaware of the looming crisis. For them, each day was still a step forward, a moment of growth, a chance to rebuild their lives. Sarah, in particular, was starting to feel more and more like her old self, only better. The graphic design course she had enrolled in was tough, but she found herself improving each day. She spent her evenings working on projects for local businesses, using the skills she had gained from the workshops. The work was empowering, and the money she earned gave her a sense of independence she hadn't felt in years. But it wasn't just about the financial freedom. It was about proving to herself that she could do something meaningful. The Sarah who had wandered the streets, barely able to trust anyone or anything, was starting to fade. In her place was someone who believed she was worthy of success, someone who was ready to stand on her own. One evening, as Sarah was working on a logo design for a small cafe that had recently opened, Monica stopped by her apartment to check in. "Hey, Sarah, how's it going with the design work?" Monica asked, leaning against the doorframe. Sarah looked up, grinning. "I'm actually really enjoying it. It's challenging, but in a good way. I've been working on this logo for a local cafe, and it's coming together. I feel like I'm really finding my groove." "That's awesome," Monica said, her voice warm with pride. "I always knew you had it in you. I'm really proud of how far you've come." "Thanks, Monica. It means a lot to me. It still feels a little unreal, but every day it feels more like this could really be my future, you know?" Monica smiled. "It is your future. You've earned it." But just as Sarah was beginning to think she had turned a corner, a storm was brewing just beyond her reach. Elon was at the city hall meeting the next day, standing in front of the city council members. His heart pounded as he presented the data on the program's success so far, how the incubator had helped dozens of residents launch businesses, how the job placement rates had been higher than anticipated, how the residents had started forming strong community bonds that were giving them the strength to fight their personal demons. He shared testimonies from people like James, who had gone from fixing bikes in the corner of the community center to running his own successful mobile bike repair business, and Sarah, who was now earning an income doing something she loved. The council members listened intently, but the skeptical faces remained unchanged. They weren't convinced. They still saw homelessness as a problem too big, too complicated to fix. They saw Elon as a dreamer, a visionary who hadn't quite grasped the full scope of the issue. They saw his solution as a nice experiment, but not something that could be scaled and sustained long-term. The turning point came when Councilman Bradford, one of the most outspoken critics of the project, spoke up. "Mr. Musk, your project has done some good. There's no doubt about that," Bradford said, his voice cold. "But you're asking us to continue funding a program that's based on an idealistic vision of rehabilitation. You're asking us to take money from the city's already stretched budget and invest in something that, frankly, we're not sure will work in the long run." Elon's pulse quickened, but he kept his cool. "Councilman, I understand your concerns. But what we're doing here is not just about giving people a place to stay. It's about providing a new kind of hope. What we've seen in this community is that when people are given the tools and the support, they can turn their lives around. They can rebuild from the ground up. We've seen it happen. And I truly believe we can do it on a larger scale, but we need your support." Bradford didn't back down. "And if it doesn't work? If it's just a temporary fix that fades out over time? What do we do then?" Elon paused, feeling the weight of the question. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the faith that they were willing to invest in something bigger than themselves. It was about believing that real change was possible. "I'm not asking you to put your faith in a dream," Elon said, his voice steady and resolute. "I'm asking you to believe in the people who have been given a second chance, the people who have proven that change is possible. We've seen people like Sarah and James rise from the ashes. We've seen people who were once forgotten start to build lives again. And I'm asking you to believe in that." We can make this work, if we do it together. The room fell silent as the council members exchanged glances. Elon could feel the tension in the air, the weight of their decision pressing down on him. This wasn't just a fight for funding. It was a fight for the future of the program, for the future of the people who depended on it. The next few days were a blur. Elon spent hours meeting with supporters, lobbying city officials, and working with his team to prepare for the next phase of the project. But even as the pressure mounted, something inside him began to shift. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't just focused on the outcome. He was focused on the process, on the real change he was seeing in the lives of the people he had committed to helping. And then, the call came. A final vote was scheduled for the following week. Elon had to give everything he had to make sure they won the council's approval. But regardless of the outcome, he knew one thing for certain. The impact of the program had already been felt. The days leading up to the city council's final vote were grueling. Elon's mind never stopped racing. The weight of the decision pressing on the future of the project seemed to take over every waking moment. He knew that if the council voted against continued funding, it could end everything: the incubator, the homes, the opportunity for people like Sarah and James to change their lives. The thought was unbearable. But even in the face of such intense pressure, something inside Elon began to crystallize. He wasn't just fighting for a program. He was fighting for the people who had been given a second chance. He thought about Sarah, who was becoming a designer, and James, who was building his bike repair business. He thought about the dozens of others who had embraced this opportunity to rebuild themselves, to rise from the ashes of their former lives. This was more than just a pilot project. It was proof that real, sustainable change was possible, and he wouldn't let it slip away. On the morning of the vote, Elon stood in front of the community center, watching as the sun rose. The city felt quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something monumental to happen. The people who lived in the community were arriving one by one, just like any other day, but today was different. Today, they had no idea what the future held, but they knew they had to show up. It wasn't just for the program. It was for themselves. Elon had asked the residents to come to the city council meeting. He knew it was a long shot, but he wanted them to be seen, to show the council what they had become. Not just a group of homeless individuals, but a thriving community working toward a better future. They weren't asking for charity. They were asking for a chance. As the council meeting loomed closer, Elon sat in his office, waiting for Monica to arrive. She had been his right hand throughout this journey, helping to manage the day-to-day operations and making sure the residents' voices were heard. Today, she had promised to stand by him, just as she had from the very beginning. She walked in, holding a coffee cup, her tired eyes betraying how long she'd been awake, preparing for the battle ahead. "It's a beautiful morning," she said softly, as if trying to keep the mood light. "Yeah," Elon said, standing up and looking out the window. "A lot is riding on today." "You've got this, Elon," Monica said, walking over to him and placing a hand on his shoulder. "The council can see the numbers. They can see the progress. And they can see the people who are living proof that it works." Elon nodded, but his mind was still spinning. "I just hope it's enough. I'm not just fighting for the program anymore. I'm fighting for these people." Monica gave him a reassuring smile. "That's why it'll work. You're not asking them to invest in a dream. You're asking them to believe in a future that's already unfolding. Look at Sarah. Look at James. Look at how far they've come. It's not just data. It's real lives." By the time Elon and Monica arrived at City Hall, the room was packed. The council chambers were buzzing with tension. Dozens of people, community members, local activists, and residents of the program had shown up to stand behind Elon. There was a palpable energy in the room as everyone waited for the council members to take their seats. Elon took a deep breath as he walked up to the front of the room. As he made his way to the podium, he scanned the audience, his gaze landing on Sarah and James. They were sitting together, their faces filled with nervous anticipation. But there was something different about them, something stronger. They weren't just there as spectators. They were there as representatives of what the project had become. Their presence alone spoke volumes. When Elon reached the podium, he felt a surge of confidence. He knew that the future of the project rested on this moment, but he also knew that he had something the council couldn't ignore. the truth. The evidence that this wasn't just a program, it was a movement. Elon cleared his throat, the room falling silent. He addressed the council with the calm authority he had cultivated over the last few years. Thank you, council members, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I'm here not just as the founder of this project, but as someone who has seen firsthand the transformative power of community. The people in this room, Sarah, James, and many others, are living proof that when we give people a chance, when we provide the right tools and support, they can rise up and build new lives. They can become business owners. They can become artists. They can become contributors to society in ways they never thought possible. He paused, his voice steady but filled with passion. We're not just building homes. We're building futures. We're not just addressing the symptoms of homelessness. We're addressing the root causes. We're creating opportunities for people to heal, to grow, and to thrive. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. We need your belief in the future we're working to create. Elon turned and nodded toward the residents in the audience. These people have made incredible progress, but they need your support to continue moving forward. They need the stability of this program. They need the opportunity to continue growing, to keep their businesses, to expand their lives. Please, don't take that away from them. The room was quiet. Elon could feel the weight of his words in the air, a charged silence hanging over the crowd. He knew that the decision wouldn't be easy for the council, but he also knew that they had the power to make a real difference. After a long pause, Councilman Bradford stood up. The tension in the room was palpable as he approached the microphone. Elon's heart pounded in his chest as he prepared himself for what was coming. "Mr. Musk," Bradford said, his tone measured, "you've presented a compelling case, and I can't deny the results you've shown. There's no question that the program has had a positive impact on many of the residents. But my concern has always been about scalability and sustainability. How do we ensure that this continues to work long-term?" Elon took a deep breath, his voice unwavering. "Councilman, the answer is simple. By believing in the people who are here. This isn't a temporary fix. This is a model for the future. It's about investing in human potential. The people here have proven that they can thrive when given the right support. That's not something we can ignore. That's something we need to build on." The room held its breath as Bradford looked down, considering the answer. The other council members exchanged glances. There was a shift in the air, a subtle change, but it was there. After what seemed like an eternity, Bradford turned back to the council. "I'm willing to put my faith in this project, Mr. Musk," he said. "We'll approve the funding for another year. But this time, we need a clear plan for long-term sustainability, and we'll need to see continuous results." Elon exhaled, a wave of relief washing over him. It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was enough to keep the project alive, to keep the dream of transformation moving forward. As the meeting adjourned, Elon and Monica stood by, watching as the residents gathered around, their faces filled with a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Sarah and James approached Elon, their eyes shining with gratitude. "You did it," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "You really did it." "We all did it," Elon replied, smiling at her. "This is just the beginning." As the group celebrated their victory, Elon looked around at the people he had fought so hard for. They weren't just residents anymore. They were family, and he was committed to making sure they had every chance to succeed. The battle with the city council was over, but the journey was just beginning. With the approval for another year of funding in place, Elon knew that the stakes had only gotten higher. Now, more than ever, the program needed to prove that it could not only sustain itself but grow, transforming lives on a larger scale and showing the world that lasting change was possible for those experiencing homelessness. For Elon, the reality of the challenge was starting to sink in. He had won a battle, but the war was still far from over. He spent the following days poring over data, reviewing feedback from the residents, and meeting with his team to create a clear path for the program's next phase. There were no shortcuts now. He had to find a way to make this work permanently. But while Elon was focusing on the bigger picture, the residents of the community were living their own transformations. Every day was a small victory, each one adding up to something much larger than themselves. They were proving that hope wasn't just a concept, it was a way of life. Sarah sat in her small apartment one evening, staring at the screen in front of her. The logo she had been designing for the cafe was finally done. It wasn't perfect. She knew there was always room for improvement, but it was hers. Her first paid project, her first real step into the world she had once believed was forever closed off to her. She leaned back in her chair and let out a deep breath. It wasn't just the logo she had completed. It was a milestone in her life. She remembered the days when she had been on the streets, drifting from one shelter to the next, unsure of where the next meal or safe place to sleep would come from. She had never imagined she would be here, working on something meaningful, something that could make a difference. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Monica, her mentor and friend, who had been there for her through it all. "Hey, Sarah," Monica said with a grin. "I've got something for you." Sarah looked up, curious. "What is it?" Monica handed her an envelope. "It's an invitation to an interview with one of the best graphic design firms in town. They've seen some of your work, and they're interested in having you come in for a formal interview. This could be your big break." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're serious?" "I'm serious," Monica replied, her tone full of pride. "You've earned it, Sarah. You've put in the work, and now it's your time." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, and for a moment, she didn't know what to say. All those years of hardship, of not knowing if she could make it out, this moment felt like a dream. She had come so far. "Thank you, Monica," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know where I'd be without you." Monica gave her a hug. "You did it, Sarah. You got yourself here. And this is just the beginning." Meanwhile, across the community center, James was having his own breakthrough. He had been working tirelessly on his bike repair business, which was now gaining traction. His mobile bike repair service had expanded, and he was hiring a few of the other residents to help him. The success of his business had become a beacon of hope for others in the community. James was living proof that with hard work and determination, it was possible to create something lasting, even when you started with nothing. One morning, James received a call from a local cycling team that had heard about his business. They were looking for someone to sponsor their team and repair their bikes. The offer was unexpected, but James knew it was the opportunity he had been waiting for. "I can't believe this is happening," James said to his team as they gathered in the community center. "This is a huge deal. If we can get this contract, it'll take our business to the next level." The others in the room cheered, excited for James' success. They had all watched him grow from a guy who had barely a place to stay into a business owner with real clients. It was proof that the program was working, not just for the individual, but for the community as a whole. Back in Elon's office, the pressure was mounting. He knew that the program was on the verge of something big, but it wasn't just about continuing the work, it was about expanding it. If they could show that this program could succeed in this community, they could scale it to other cities, helping thousands of others in similar situations. But first, they needed to prove that it wasn't a fluke. Elon sat at his desk, reviewing the financials and strategic plans for the coming year. The program had started strong, but they had to raise the bar. They needed more businesses to partner with, more resources to bring in. The incubator needed to be a fully functioning ecosystem, one where people could build lives, businesses, and futures, not just escape homelessness. He spent hours drafting a new proposal for funding. It had to be airtight. If they wanted this to be sustainable, he had to show the city that the project was more than a temporary solution. It was a model that could be replicated, that could make a real impact on a larger scale. The next morning, he sent the proposal to Monica. He couldn't do this alone. He needed her expertise to help navigate the complexities of scaling the program. They were about to enter a new phase, one that required all hands on deck. This wasn't just about rescuing people from the streets anymore. It was about giving them the tools to thrive. As the weeks passed, Elon's phone buzzed constantly with updates from the community. There were new partnerships forming, new businesses sprouting up, and most importantly, new stories of hope. People like Sarah and James weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And the more people they helped, the more they realized that they had started something much bigger than themselves. But the city was still hesitant. While the funding had been approved for another year, the path to long-term sustainability was uncertain. The council wanted results, and they wanted them fast. There were still critics who questioned the viability of the program, who wondered if it was all just a flash in the pan. Elon wasn't discouraged. The road ahead would be tough, but he had never shied away from a challenge. This was what he had always dreamed of, creating something that changed the world, one person at a time. And with every new success story, he knew they were getting closer to that goal. The excitement within the community was palpable, but as the months wore on, Elon began to feel the pressure intensify. The next stage of the project required not just ambition, but a near-perfect execution. They were standing at a crossroads. Could they continue the momentum they had built, or would they falter when it came time to scale? Elon knew that expansion meant more than just building homes or providing jobs. It meant creating a self-sustaining ecosystem where people could thrive on their own. It was about building lasting systems that didn't rely on charity, but on community, empowerment, and opportunity. They needed to prove this model could work on a larger scale, and that was no easy task. The first challenge was securing new funding. The city council had approved a year's extension, but they had made it clear. They wanted to see more concrete results before considering long-term investment. The clock was ticking. Elon had to prepare a comprehensive report, one that detailed not just the success stories of individuals like Sarah and James, but also the measurable outcomes that proved the project was making a sustainable impact. It wasn't enough to say that people were happier or more hopeful. They needed hard data, job retention rates, business growth statistics, increased access to healthcare, and successful housing placements. Every success, every challenge, needed to be quantified and presented in a way that would silence any lingering doubts. Elon spent sleepless nights going through spreadsheets, working with the team to gather data, and meeting with key business partners. He knew that if they couldn't secure a new round of funding, the entire project would come to an abrupt end. There were no shortcuts now. It was make or break. Meanwhile, Sarah was doing everything she could to prepare for the next chapter of her life. The design agency had offered her a freelance contract, which meant a steady income for the first time in years. But it also meant a new level of responsibility and pressure. She had to prove she could handle the workload, manage her time effectively, and still be the creative person she had always wanted to be. But despite the pressure, Sarah felt ready. She wasn't the same person who had arrived at the community center just months ago. She had built a career, cultivated relationships, and gained the confidence to follow her passion. Every email she sent, every design she completed, was proof that she had made it, that she was no longer defined by her past. One afternoon, after finishing a design for a local restaurant's rebranding project, Sarah walked down the hall to the shared community space where other residents were gathered. As she walked in, she was greeted with smiles and high fives. Her success was their success, and they all celebrated together. James, who had just signed a new contract with the cycling team, stood up with a grin. "Sarah, that logo you did for the cafe is amazing. They loved it. This is what we've been talking about. This is real change." Sarah beamed. "I'm just getting started, James. There's more to come." It was moments like these that reminded Sarah why she had decided to stay in the program. It wasn't just about getting off the streets. It was about forging connections, lifting each other up, and proving that they all had something valuable to offer the world. But not everyone was as optimistic. As the residents thrived, there were still doubts in the city council chambers. Councilmember Bradford, who had been one of the few supporters of the program, had become increasingly concerned about its scalability. There was talk of tightening the budget and pulling back on investments in favor of more traditional solutions. Elon's latest report, despite its impressive data, hadn't fully convinced everyone that the program could expand beyond the city's borders. "Elon," Bradford said one evening, sitting down with him in a small conference room at City Hall, "the numbers look good, but they don't tell the whole story. You've done great things with a relatively small group, but what happens when you start working with larger populations? What happens when you scale this across the entire city, or worse, to other cities with different challenges?" Elon took a deep breath. "Councilman, I understand the concerns, but this program is designed to adapt. It's about creating a blueprint for change that doesn't depend on just one solution. Yes, we've had small successes, but we've built a model that can be replicated. We're not just giving people a roof, we're giving them a framework for long-term growth. We've got the data to prove it." Bradford leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "I want to believe that, Elon. But we're facing a financial crisis, and the city can't afford to invest in something that might not work. What's the contingency plan if things don't scale as you hope? Elon felt the weight of the question. He knew Bradford's concerns were valid. Scaling the project was a massive risk, but it was one he was willing to take. The only other option was to let people like Sarah, James, and the others slip through the cracks again. And he couldn't let that happen. We have a plan, Elon replied. It's about building partnerships with businesses, nonprofits, and local governments. It's about creating a network of support that extends beyond just the homes we build. We'll take this slow, step by step, but we're committed to proving that this model can work. As the days passed, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the brink of something much larger than themselves. The data and success stories spoke for themselves, but the question remained. Would the city and the world believe in it enough to invest in the future? With just a few weeks remaining before the final council vote on the future of the project, Elon knew the next decision could change everything. There would be no more second chances. They had to make the case not just for the continuation of the program, but for its expansion. They had to prove that a little hope, a little investment, could lead to transformative change. The day of the final vote was quickly approaching. Elon spent hours reviewing his notes, refining his speech, and meeting with residents who had stories to share. It wasn't just about the program anymore. It was about showing the city that this was their future, too. When the day arrived, the council chamber was filled with residents, business owners, and advocates. Everyone was there for one purpose: to make sure the program had a fighting chance to continue. As the debate began, Elon sat quietly, listening to the concerns of some council members and the impassioned defense of the project by others. When it was his turn to speak, Elon took the podium with a calm resolve. This wasn't just about numbers or statistics anymore. It was about real lives, real people who were depending on this chance to change everything. We're not asking for handouts, Elon said, his voice steady. We're asking for the chance to show what happens when we invest in people. When we believe in them, when we give them the tools to succeed, the results speak for themselves. This is the future we want to build. Not just for a select few, but for an entire community. The room fell silent. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. Elon knew this was the moment that would determine whether the program lived or died. The day of the vote had finally arrived. As Elon stepped into the City Hall building, he felt a mixture of determination and anxiety. The pressure was crushing, but he had no choice but to face it head-on. This vote would not just determine the future of the program. It would shape the fate of hundreds of people who had finally begun to rebuild their lives. And that was a responsibility Elon could not take lightly. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. Residents and supporters filled the seats in the audience, their faces a mix of hope and fear. Some were clutching handwritten signs that read, "Change starts with us, homelessness isn't a choice, and invest in hope, not just numbers." Elon took a deep breath as he walked past the rows of familiar faces, offering a small nod of acknowledgement to each person who had become part of the journey. In the front row, Sarah, James, Monica, and others from the program sat together, waiting for Elon to take the podium. They had all been through so much, and now they were hoping, no, praying, that their stories could make a difference. Elon took his place at the podium, his heart pounding in his chest. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional shuffle of papers. He could see the skeptical faces of some council members, arms crossed and expressions hardened. But he also saw the hopeful ones, the ones who had already come to understand that this program was something special. Councilmember Bradford, who had been a steadfast supporter of the program, gave Elon an encouraging smile. But even Bradford couldn't mask the underlying tension in the room. Elon Musk, the mayor, announced, her voice echoing through the chamber, "You may now address the council." Elon cleared his throat and began, "Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, and honored guests. I stand before you today not as a businessman, but as someone who believes deeply in the power of second chances. I've seen firsthand the potential that lies within every person, no matter where they come from or what circumstances they've faced." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the room. He could see the faces of the residents in the crowd, Sarah, James, and others. Their eyes were filled with hope, and that gave him the strength to continue. What we've created here isn't just a shelter, he continued. It's a community, a place where people aren't defined by their past mistakes, but by their ability to rise above them. And together, we've seen lives change. People like Sarah, who once struggled to survive on the streets, are now thriving as a graphic designer. People like James, who never thought he would have the chance to start his own business, are now employing others and creating opportunities. These are not just success stories. They are living proof that when we invest in people, we unlock the potential for something greater. Elon glanced down at the stack of data he had prepared for this moment, but instead of focusing on the numbers, he decided to speak from the heart. Yes, the numbers are important, he said, but numbers alone don't tell the full story. The people in this room, people who once had nothing, are proof that when we give people a chance, when we help them build a future, the results are immeasurable. He took another deep breath. This program isn't just about saving lives, it's about transforming them. And we have the chance to take that transformation beyond these walls, to scale it and give others the opportunity to do what these incredible individuals have done. There was a long silence as Elon finished his speech, and for a moment, it felt as though the weight of the room had shifted. The skepticism was still there, but now there was something else in the air. Hope, perhaps, or the possibility of change. Councilmember Bradford stood up first. I've seen the work that's been done here. I've visited the program, spoken to the residents, and I can tell you, I believe in this. I've been convinced by the real change I've seen in the lives of these people. But I also understand that the question now is whether this model can be scaled. And that's what we need to discuss. The mayor nodded. Indeed, Councilmember Bradford. We have to make sure that this isn't just a one-off success, but something that can truly be sustained. Elon, what is your plan for the future? How do you intend to scale this? Elon took a moment before responding. Our plan is simple. We need more partners. We've already seen success with local businesses, and we're in discussions with other cities that have expressed interest in replicating this model. The key is to build a network of support, businesses, nonprofits, and government working together. But we also need continued investment from the city to maintain the infrastructure and to keep the momentum going. Bradford spoke again. And what happens if the funding doesn't materialize? If we can't get the buy-in we need from other cities or businesses, what's the contingency? Elon's face hardened, but he remained calm. We will adapt. We've already learned to be flexible. We'll work with whatever resources we have, but we can't afford to stop now. The people who have found a new life in this program deserve that chance, and we owe it to them to keep fighting. The discussion continued for hours, back and forth between council members, some asking tough questions while others offered support. Elon felt the weight of every word. This was more than just a vote. It was a referendum on a vision he had poured everything into. Then, at long last, the moment arrived. The mayor called for a vote. One by one, the council members raised their hands to vote. Elon's heart raced as he watched the results being tallied. There were a few tense moments, but finally, the final vote was called. The room held its breath. By a vote of 8-3, the council has approved the continued funding for the program, with an additional commitment to work on scaling it across the city and beyond. A wave of relief washed over Elon, but he was quick to turn to the crowd. They had done it. Together, they had won. The future was still uncertain, but now there was hope, real, tangible hope. The residents erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the chamber. Sarah, James, Monica, and the others leapt to their feet, hugging and high-fiving. Elon's heart swelled with pride, but it wasn't his victory, it was theirs. They had fought for this together. Outside the council chambers, the sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city. It felt like the beginning of something new. The program had passed the test, but the real work was just starting. Elon knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges. There would be setbacks, doubters, and moments of doubt. But he had seen the power of what a little hope and investment could do, and that was worth fighting for. As Elon stood outside, looking at the residents who had become more than just participants, they were partners in this journey, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. This wasn't just about rescuing people from homelessness. This was about giving them the power to change their own lives. And that was something worth building, no matter the cost. With the city council's vote behind him, Elon felt a mixture of relief and renewed determination. The program was safe, for now. But as he stood on the cusp of a new chapter, the road ahead was full of complexities. Scaling the project across the city, and eventually to other regions, wasn't going to be easy. The stakes were higher, the scrutiny greater, and the financial commitment larger than anything they had encountered so far. For Sarah, the council's decision felt like the validation of everything she had worked for. The night of the vote, after the excitement had settled, she sat quietly in her small apartment, reflecting on how far she had come. The apartment she now called home was modest, but it felt like a mansion compared to the streets she had once lived on. Her computer screen glowed softly as she worked on her latest project, another branding campaign for a local restaurant. The freedom to work on her own terms, with clients who valued her skills, was more than she had ever dreamed. But as grateful as she was, Sarah couldn't ignore the responsibility that had come with her success. She now had a platform, her voice mattered, and she wasn't going to waste it. In the weeks following the council's approval, she began volunteering her time to mentor others in the program, helping them build resumes, prepare for interviews, and develop creative portfolios. She knew what it felt like to be overlooked, to feel like the world didn't care. Now, she was determined to show others how they could change their own narratives. One afternoon, while she was hosting a small group workshop in the community center, she noticed a familiar face. It was Laura, a woman who had arrived in the program only a few weeks earlier, hesitant and unsure of her abilities. "Sarah," Laura said shyly, standing at the door of the room, "I was hoping you could help me with something. I'm not sure where to start, but I really want to try." Sarah smiled and waved her in. "Of course, Laura. What's on your mind?" As Laura sat down, Sarah could see the same fear in her eyes that she had seen in herself all those months ago. But Sarah also saw something else, potential. The same kind of potential that had fueled her own journey. And she wasn't about to let it go to waste. Back in the heart of the program's operations, Elon had already started laying the groundwork for the next phase. The financials were daunting. To expand, they needed millions in investment, new partnerships, and the kind of infrastructure that could sustain thousands of people. But Elon was undeterred. If there was one thing he knew how to do, it was think big. He called a meeting with the project's financial team. "We need to start reaching out to larger investors. But it can't just be the usual players. I want businesses that believe in this cause, not just for profit, but for purpose. It's about building a future, not just for people who are homeless, but for the businesses that want to be part of a more sustainable, compassionate economy." The conversation turned to expansion strategies. To scale the program, they would need a comprehensive approach. Elon had already begun discussions with several corporate partners, companies that had the resources and networks to assist in building affordable housing, creating job opportunities, and offering services like mental health care and job training. But it wasn't enough to rely solely on big corporations. The program needed to forge stronger relationships with local businesses too. "We need the buy-in from the ground up," Elon said, his voice firm. "This can't just be about filling quotas. It's about creating lasting change. We're not just asking for donations. We're asking for commitment to change the way society views homelessness." Elon's vision was bold, and the meetings that followed were intense. Some investors and businesses were on board, while others were hesitant, questioning the long-term viability of a program that demanded more than just a financial commitment. But Elon wasn't backing down. He knew that in order to truly change the landscape of homelessness, they needed to go beyond just providing basic needs. They needed to create an environment where people could truly thrive. Meanwhile, James was grappling with his own set of challenges. His small business, the bike repair shop he had started with Elon's help, was starting to take off. But success came with its own pressures. He had to manage inventory, keep track of employees, and make sure his customers received top-notch service. Despite the growth, he couldn't shake the nagging fear that it might all come crashing down. What if he wasn't as good at this as he thought? What if the business couldn't sustain itself? One evening, after closing up shop, James sat at the counter, staring at the empty shop, his mind racing. The weight of the responsibility was immense, but he had come too far to turn back. He thought of his old life on the streets, of the hopelessness that had once consumed him, and he realized something. This wasn't just a business. It was a testament to everything he had overcome. When Sarah stopped by the shop the next morning, she could see the exhaustion on James' face. "You're looking a little worn out," she said, leaning against the counter. James smiled weakly. "It's just a lot to handle. Running a business wasn't in the plan when I first got here." Sarah chuckled. "Yeah, I get that. But look at what you've built. You've created something real. And you're not doing it alone. You've got support. You've got the whole program behind you." James nodded slowly. "I know. Sometimes I wonder if I'm really cut out for it." Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "You are. You've got something a lot of people don't, resilience. And that's going to carry you through. You've already proven you can handle more than most people ever will." As Sarah left the shop that day, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't alone in this. He had the community behind him, and together, they could overcome any challenge. The next phase of the project wasn't just about surviving. It was about thriving. As the program moved forward with its expansion plans, Elon encountered a major obstacle. The first phase of scaling involved creating additional housing, but finding enough affordable land was proving to be a monumental challenge. Local governments were slow to respond. Zoning laws were restrictive, and real estate developers were cautious. "Elon, we're hitting a wall," one of the project managers told him in a meeting one afternoon. "The land availability just isn't there, and without it, we can't build." Elon paused, his mind racing. The urgency was undeniable. Without new housing options, they couldn't expand the program or help more people. But Elon wasn't about to give up. "We need to be creative," he said. "Look for underused spaces, vacant buildings, and used parking lots. Let's not wait for the perfect piece of land. We need to be flexible, innovative." And with that, the team began investigating unconventional housing solutions, repurposing empty office buildings, creating tiny home villages on unused plots of land, and even considering mobile housing units that could be relocated as needed. It wasn't the traditional approach, but it was the kind of innovative thinking Elon had always believed in. As the plans to scale moved forward, the program began to see real results. People like Sarah, James, and the other residents weren't just surviving. They were thriving. They were starting businesses, finding stable jobs, and becoming active members of their communities. But the true test was yet to come. Could this momentum be maintained as the program expanded into new territories? Could they continue to build an ecosystem of support that was self-sustaining? Elon knew there were many challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he was filled with a sense of certainty. This was only the beginning. As the program expanded across the city, Elon knew that this was only the beginning of the real test. The vision for a nationwide initiative was within reach, but the financial and logistical challenges were more significant than he had anticipated. In the weeks following the approval of the city council's vote, Elon had quickly begun to secure new corporate partnerships and government funding to help scale the project. But the reality of sustaining such a massive operation was proving to be a far more intricate puzzle than anyone had expected. The concept was simple. Elon needed to form partnerships with companies that had both the resources and the social responsibility to help address the homelessness crisis. But securing those partnerships was anything but easy. Despite the growing momentum of the project, convincing corporations to invest in a program that didn't promise immediate profits was a hard sell. One morning, Elon sat down in a sleek conference room with executives from several major tech companies. On the surface, these companies appeared to be ideal partners. They had the capital, the infrastructure, and the reputation to help scale the program. But as the meeting went on, it became clear that not everyone at the table shared Elon's sense of urgency. "You're asking us to commit to something with no guarantees," one executive said, glancing over Elon's proposal. "While we support social responsibility, we also have shareholders to answer to. How do you plan to ensure a return on this investment? I need to see more concrete numbers before we move forward." Elon paused, looking out the window at the city below. His mind raced for a response. He had the data, he had the success stories, but they weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They were real lives. "It's not about profit margins," Elon said, his voice steady but firm. "This program isn't about charity, it's about impact. The return here is a more sustainable, more just society. You can't measure that in dollars and cents. The room went silent. Elon felt the weight of the moment. He had built his companies on the promise of innovation, of pushing boundaries, but this was different. This wasn't just a tech product or a new market, it was people's lives. Another executive, this one from a sustainable energy company, spoke up. Elon, I see where you're coming from, and we do want to be part of something meaningful. But if we're talking about long-term sustainability, we need clear, scalable models. You need to make sure this is replicable in multiple cities, across the country. Elon nodded. That's the plan. But first, we need to ensure that the foundation we're building here works. Once we have the model right, the scaling will be easier. While Elon navigated the complexities of business partnerships, Sarah was dealing with her own challenges. The success she had found in her career and personal life was undeniable, but a deep-seated fear continued to linger. What if she failed? What if the world that had welcomed her back into its fold decided it didn't need her after all? It was a Wednesday afternoon when Sarah received a call from an old friend. It had been months since they last spoke, but the voice on the other end was all too familiar. "Sarah, I'm in trouble," Laura said, her voice strained. "I've been trying so hard, but I lost my job last week. I don't know what to do." Sarah's heart sank. Laura had been doing so well. She had landed a job in a local cafe, had a steady routine, and was even starting to make new friends. It had seemed like the beginning of a new chapter for her, just like it had been for Sarah. But the harsh realities of living paycheck to paycheck had caught up with Laura far too soon. Sarah knew this wasn't just a setback for Laura, it was a wake-up call. The journey to stability, even after securing a job and a place to live, was long and full of obstacles. The system wasn't built for people like Laura to thrive. It was built for people who could weather the constant storm of layoffs, health crises, or just bad luck. Without a strong, supportive network, falling back into old patterns of insecurity was a real risk. "I'm coming over," Sarah said. "We'll figure this out." James, meanwhile, was facing his own struggles in his bike repair business. The pressure to expand, hire more employees, and manage the increasing flow of customers was taking a toll. Despite the success he had seen so far, he was overwhelmed by the mounting responsibilities. He'd started the business on a shoestring budget, and now, he needed to grow it in a way that was sustainable. One afternoon, after an especially hectic day, James sat with his business mentor, Tom, who had been guiding him since the program's inception. Tom had years of experience in the small business world and had seen his own companies rise and fall. He understood the weight of the decisions James was facing. "You've come a long way, James," Tom said, taking a sip of his coffee. "But you're trying to do too much too quickly. I know you want to scale, but you've got to build a solid foundation first." I know. But what if I don't move fast enough?" James asked, the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "What if the demand outpaces what I can do?" Tom leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "You're not in this alone. Don't forget about your support network. There's no shame in asking for help. You've already got a team. Use them." James nodded, but the weight of it all didn't feel lighter. His desire to succeed and build a stable future was stronger than ever, but now, he had to balance that with a recognition that he couldn't carry the burden alone. The support from the program was vital, and the sooner he realized that, the better off he'd be. As Elon continued to push forward with expansion, the program's weaknesses began to show. The demand for housing was higher than anticipated, and the resources were stretched thin. The innovative housing solutions that had seemed like a breakthrough, repurposing office buildings and converting vacant lots, were running into unexpected complications. Permits, building codes, and logistical challenges created delays that threatened to derail the entire plan. Even more troubling were the stories of residents who had found themselves stuck in the system. Many of them, despite receiving jobs and support, still struggled with the emotional scars of homelessness. Without the right mental health support and long-term coaching, some residents were falling back into old habits, unable to handle the demands of daily life. Elon sat at his desk late one evening, his head in his hands. He had built companies that changed the world, but this was different. This was personal. The stakes weren't just profit margins, they were people's lives. And if he failed, he wasn't just letting down investors, he was letting down families, communities, and individuals who had placed their trust in the program. It became clear that, despite the rapid progress, the foundation of the program needed more work. Elon realized that scaling too quickly could hurt the long-term sustainability of the initiative. He needed to refocus the efforts on strengthening the support network, the mental health resources, job coaching, and housing that could create real, lasting change. Only then could the program grow without risking its core mission. The weight of the program's expansion and its growing pains were starting to wear on Elon. The ambitious dream he had cultivated, one built on the hope of lifting people out of homelessness and creating a sustainable future, was running into roadblocks that felt impossible to overcome. The numbers were growing. More people were being housed, more jobs were being filled. But the strain of keeping it all together was becoming too much. This was supposed to be a movement of change, of innovation, but now, it felt like a ticking time bomb. The pressure from investors to show results, the overwhelming logistical challenges of scaling, and the emotional toll it was taking on the program's beneficiaries, all of it was reaching a breaking point. One rainy evening, Elon stood by his office window, staring out at the city skyline. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside his mind. He was used to the chaos of business. He had built empires on disruption, but this was different. This wasn't about technology or gadgets. It was about human lives. People who had been cast aside by society, people who were depending on him to give them a chance. And for the first time in a long time, Elon wasn't sure he could carry it alone. He had reached out to every resource, every connection. Corporate partners had pulled out, citing lack of immediate returns. The government's support had been inconsistent, and the pressure to produce tangible results had only grown. He found himself asking, "What if I can't fix this?" His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "How are you holding up?" Elon sighed, his fingers hovering over the screen. Sarah was one of the few people who really understood the weight he carried. But he wasn't sure if he could burden her with his doubts. The last thing he wanted was for anyone to see him as weak. He typed out a response, but then deleted it. Instead, he dialed her number. "Hey, it's me," he said when she picked up, trying to sound casual. "I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we had a real conversation about scaling the program. Maybe we need to slow down. I don't know if we can keep up with this pace." "I've been thinking the same thing," Sarah said. "It's been a lot, hasn't it? But Elon, the people who are counting on us, they don't have the luxury of time." His heart tightened. She was right. The people they were helping, people like Laura, James, and countless others, were counting on them to succeed. There was no turning back. "We can't give up," Elon said, his voice firm despite the doubts that lingered in the back of his mind. "But we need to rethink how we're doing this. We need to focus on what's really important. It's not just about the numbers, it's about the people." Meanwhile, Sarah's role in the program had expanded far beyond what she had ever imagined. She had gone from a participant to an advocate, helping those who had once been like her find their footing in a world that had no place for them. She had become a beacon of hope for many, but the pressure of being that beacon was starting to take its toll. One afternoon, as she sat in the community center she had helped build, she overheard a conversation between two residents. "She seems to have it all together now," one woman said, her voice tinged with envy. "But I wonder how long she'll last. I mean, can anyone really escape it for good? The streets? The addiction?" Sarah heard the sharp edge in the woman's voice, and it stung. She wasn't angry with her. She understood the skepticism, but she couldn't ignore the truth behind the question. Was it possible to escape homelessness forever? Was it possible to break free from the cycle, especially for those who had been caught in it for decades? That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Her thoughts swirled as she questioned the choices she had made, the path she had taken. She had worked so hard to rebuild her life, but the fear of falling back into the darkness still haunted her. James, too, was struggling with the weight of his business. The bike repair shop was growing, but with growth came complications, more staff to manage, larger overhead costs, and the constant worry of maintaining quality in an increasingly busy shop. He had once thought that owning a business would be the answer to everything, that it would secure his future and give him the freedom he had always dreamed of. But now, he found himself questioning whether he was really cut out for it. One evening, he sat down with Tom again, his mentor, trying to figure out his next steps. "I don't know if I can keep up with this," James confessed, his voice heavy. "I'm working day and night, and it's not just the work. It's the stress. Every time I think I'm making progress, something else goes wrong. I feel like I'm always running on empty." Tom looked at him with understanding, his expression softening. "James, you've come a long way. You've got a lot on your plate, but it doesn't have to be all on your shoulders. You're not in this alone. Remember that." James felt a surge of frustration. He had heard the same thing over and over, but he didn't feel it. He didn't feel like he had anyone to lean on. The community center? They were busy with their own struggles. The program? It was all about housing and employment, but what about the psychological weight of trying to build a life from nothing? He wondered, could anyone truly escape homelessness, or was this just a temporary fix, a cycle that would keep spinning no matter what? It was the next morning when Elon received an unexpected visit. Sarah and James, recognizing the strain Elon was under, decided to come together and talk things through. They arrived at his office early, both looking worn out but determined. "Elon, we've been thinking," Sarah began. "Maybe it's time we all took a step back. We can't keep pushing this program forward at full speed when we haven't even figured out how to truly stabilize it." James nodded. "We've got to rethink what we're doing. The people we're helping need more than just a job or a roof over their heads. They need community, mental health support, and time to heal." Elon sat back in his chair, processing their words. He had been so focused on scaling, on growing the program, that he had forgotten the most important element of all, the people. The foundation of the program wasn't just about housing or job placement. It was about rebuilding lives, piece by piece. He knew they had to refocus. "You're right," Elon said slowly. "We need to slow down. We need to focus on making sure that the people we're helping have the tools they need to succeed in the long term, not just the short term." In the weeks that followed, the program made a deliberate pivot. They focused on creating stronger foundations for the individuals they helped, incorporating mental health support, long-term mentoring, and community building into the core of their work. They slowed the pace of expansion, choosing instead to perfect their model in the current areas before moving forward. They also worked closely with local mental health organizations to ensure that residents had access to the resources they needed to truly break free from the cycles of trauma and addiction. Elon, Sarah, and James found a renewed sense of purpose in their work. They didn't have all the answers, but they knew that by focusing on the individuals they were helping, they could create real, sustainable change. The decision to slow down and reevaluate the approach had been a turning point, not only for the program but for the people at its heart. With a renewed sense of purpose and direction, Elon, Sarah, and James focused their efforts on creating a sustainable model that would genuinely uplift the homeless population, not just by providing shelter and jobs, but by helping them rebuild their lives in a way that was both practical and deeply human. As they worked together, one thing became clear. The most critical part of the program was the sense of community they were building. Homelessness, they realized, was not just about a lack of a physical place to live. It was about isolation, about being cut off from the fabric of society, of not having the support and emotional connections that most people take for granted. The program, as it was evolving, was becoming something that resembled a close-knit village. There was counseling for mental health, group therapy sessions, and workshops designed not only to teach life skills, but to foster connection among participants. Sarah's role had shifted from just helping others into mentoring them. She became a living example of what was possible. But it was not just about showing people that they could succeed. It was about walking with them every step of the way. One afternoon, Sarah was walking through the community center when she spotted Laura sitting by herself. Laura had been one of the first to join the program, but after losing her job, she had fallen into a brief relapse of doubt and anxiety. Sarah sat down beside her, not saying anything for a long moment. "Laura," Sarah said, her voice soft, "you've been through worse. You know how to get through this." Laura hesitated, then looked up at Sarah. "I know, but sometimes it just feels like everything's too much. I feel like I can't handle it. I just want to give up." Sarah placed a hand on her shoulder, offering quiet support. "You don't have to do it alone. You've got this place. You've got me. We've all got each other." James, too, was going through his own transformation. The bike repair shop was doing well, But James realized that he needed more than just success in business to feel fulfilled. He needed to give back to the very community that had helped him rebuild his life. He began offering free bike repair classes to the people in the program. His shop wasn't just a business anymore. It was a way to connect with others, to help them build new skills, and to bring a sense of purpose to those who were trying to rebuild their lives. One day, as he worked with a group of participants at the shop, James looked around and realized how much had changed. The people working with him were no longer the same people who had walked in looking for a way out. They were learning new skills, sharing their stories, and feeling the pride that came from taking ownership of something important. "Look at you all," James said, wiping sweat from his brow as he smiled at the group. "I couldn't be prouder. You've learned a skill that can take you anywhere." One of the participants, a man named Marcus who had struggled with addiction and joblessness for years, spoke up. "I never thought I'd be able to do this. I've been to rehab 3 times. But this feels different. Like I'm actually making something of myself." James gave him a nod of approval. "That's what it's all about. You're building a future, one petal at a time." Elon, too, had found a deeper understanding of the work ahead of him. In a meeting with his team, he reflected on the lessons they had learned over the past few months. "The program has evolved, and we've learned that it's not just about providing immediate relief, it's about creating a long-term support system," Elon said to the gathered group, his voice steady. "It's about building a foundation where people can heal, grow, and ultimately thrive. It's about creating a community." The room was silent as everyone absorbed his words. Elon continued, speaking with the same passion that had driven him to create some of the most innovative companies in the world. But this was different. This wasn't about revolutionizing space travel or electric cars. This was about changing lives. And we're not just changing the lives of those we help. We're changing society as a whole. Every person we help become self-sufficient is a ripple effect. They become contributors to their families, their neighborhoods, their communities. As he spoke, Elon felt the weight of the challenge, but he also felt something else, hope. This was not just another business venture. It was a movement, one that had the potential to reshape how society thought about homelessness. With the model more established, the program began to gain momentum in ways they hadn't imagined. The first round of participants who had gone through the full program were now thriving, living in permanent homes, holding down jobs, and reconnecting with their families. The results were being felt not just by the individuals themselves, but by the wider community. Neighborhoods that had once been riddled with the visible signs of homelessness, abandoned tents, broken windows, and an overall sense of decay, were now starting to show signs of revival. Local businesses were seeing an increase in customers, schools were reporting better attendance, and there was a noticeable decrease in crime. It was clear that the program was having an impact far beyond just the individuals it served. By addressing homelessness from the root, it was creating a cycle of positive change that rippled outward. Elon, Sarah, and James attended a celebration one evening, held in honor of the program's first year. The venue was filled with participants, donors, local business owners, and supporters, all there to celebrate what had been accomplished. There was music, laughter, and stories of success. Elon stood off to the side, watching as people came together. People from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, united in one cause. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. The work was far from done, but they had come a long way. Sarah approached him with a smile, her eyes bright. "You did it," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "We all did." Elon gave a small nod, his eyes scanning the crowd. "We did it together." The program had evolved from a daring idea to a sustainable model of success. But even as they celebrated, Elon knew that this was just the beginning. They had laid the groundwork, but the path forward would require continued effort, innovation, and collaboration. But for now, as the evening sun set behind the city skyline, there was a sense of accomplishment that was hard to ignore. They had taken something as difficult and complex as homelessness, and instead of trying to force a quick fix, they had built something that would last, a program that not only provided homes but also restored dignity, purpose, and hope. The work wasn't done, but with the foundation laid, Elon, Sarah, and James knew that they had created something that could change the world. The celebrations from the past few months had faded into the background, But the momentum of the program continued to grow. Elon, Sarah, and James had each played their part in reshaping the future, and their work was becoming something that was not just talked about. It was being replicated. As the model for addressing homelessness took root in more cities across the country, Elon saw the ripple effect of their work continue to spread. Local governments, businesses, and community organizations were all beginning to understand the value of a holistic, community-based approach. What had started as a daring, ambitious project had become a movement that showed real, tangible results. But the work wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It had been 2 years since the program began, and in many ways, they had already exceeded their wildest expectations. Thousands of individuals had gone through the system, finding stability, jobs, and homes. They were no longer just surviving. They were thriving. Many had reunited with family, had started their own businesses, or had become advocates for others still stuck in the cycle of homelessness. Laura, one of the first to benefit from the program, had become a voice of hope. Her story of transformation was featured in national news outlets, and she had started a nonprofit aimed at providing mentorship and mental health services for people transitioning from homelessness. "I was on the edge," she said at a recent conference where she was speaking about her experience. "But this program helped me find my worth again. I didn't just need a place to sleep or a job. I needed to know that I mattered. And that's what this program did. It made me believe I could have a future." As Elon toured the new centers that had opened across the country, he couldn't help but be filled with a sense of pride. The foundation they had built together was now evolving into a nationwide initiative. Each new center had its own unique elements, but they all adhered to the core principles they had developed: mental health care, job training, housing support, and most importantly, a deep sense of community. The program was no longer just an idea. It was a proven model for change. One particular visit stood out to Elon. In a new facility in Detroit, he saw firsthand the positive impact the program was having. The building was a converted warehouse, and it buzzed with energy. People were gathered in a large communal area, working on their resumes, attending counseling sessions, or simply having a coffee together. He was introduced to Mark, a former participant who had been with the program for 6 months. Mark had been living on the streets for over 5 years before finding the program, and now he was working full-time as a counselor for new participants. "I was lost," Mark told Elon. "I didn't think I'd ever get out of the hole I was in. But when I came here, I realized it wasn't just about getting a job or a place to live. It was about finding my purpose again." Elon smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude. This was exactly the kind of success he had hoped for. For Sarah, the program had become much more than just a way to help others. It had become a lifelong mission. She had started working closely with the mental health professionals involved, developing curricula for those transitioning from homelessness to independence. Her passion for the cause had turned into a career, and she found herself constantly inspired by the stories of resilience and strength she encountered. "I never imagined I would end up here," she said one day to Elon, as they sat together in a quiet room at one of the new centers. "I used to be the one who needed help. Now, I'm the one helping others." "It's humbling." Elon nodded, knowing that Sarah's transformation was just as profound as though she was helping. She had become a cornerstone of the program, not just as a guide for the participants, but as an example of what was possible for anyone who had the courage to take a step forward. James, whose bike shop had grown exponentially, was now running a network of small businesses across several cities that offered job training to former homeless individuals. His business model was based on the idea of giving people an opportunity to learn a craft while earning a living wage. It was a win-win for everyone. "I never thought a bike shop could change lives," James said with a grin as he showed Elon the latest expansion of his business. "But now, we're not just fixing bikes. We're fixing lives." Elon couldn't help but smile. James had come so far, and the ripple effect of his success was changing the lives of many others. What had started as a small, humble shop was now a symbol of hope, a place where people learned a skill, found stability, and gave back to the community. Back in Silicon Valley, Elon was preparing for another major milestone. He had been invited to speak at a global summit on social innovation. For the first time, he wasn't talking about electric cars or rockets. He was talking about the program, about what they had accomplished, and how they had redefined the approach to homelessness. The evening before the summit, he sat alone in his office, reflecting on everything that had happened over the past few years. He thought about his initial doubts, the struggles, the moments of defeat. It had all felt so overwhelming at times. But looking back, it was clear that they had created something that was bigger than any of them. The program wasn't just about Elon Musk anymore. It wasn't about one person or one company. It had become a movement, a coalition of people working together to change the world. And it wasn't just about solving homelessness. It was about healing broken lives, one step at a time. As Elon stood on the stage at the summit the next day, he looked out at the crowd of eager faces. He was no longer the billionaire tech mogul discussing the future of space or artificial intelligence. Instead, he was a social innovator, speaking to a room filled with people who were equally committed to solving some of the world's toughest problems. Homelessness is not an impossible problem to solve, Elon began, his voice calm and firm. It's a problem that has been ignored for too long. But if we can change how we think about it, if we can start focusing not just on providing shelter but on building community, offering mental health support, and giving people the tools they need to succeed, then we can truly make a difference. As the audience applauded, Elon felt a sense of accomplishment, not just in what he had done but in what was still to come. The movement was no longer a small program. It was a force for change that was being adopted across the globe. In the years that followed, the program continued to expand, with new cities, new partnerships, and new ways of tackling the complex issue of homelessness. What started as an idea from a billionaire who believed in technology as a solution to everything had become a shining example of how human connection and compassion could change the world. Elon, Sarah, and James had each found their place in the movement. They had reshaped their own lives in the process, and in doing so, they had left a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. And for the people whose lives they had touched, the individuals who had once been invisible, forgotten, or discarded, Elon and his team had given them something far more valuable than a roof over their heads. They had given them hope. What do you think is the most important lesson we can learn from Elon, Sarah, and James' journey in solving homelessness? How do you think we can further spread this model of change? Share your thoughts and reflections below. And don't forget to subscribe. This story is just one of many that's changing the way we look at the world.